Welcome everyone to this look at the Eisner Awards for Best Writer. This is a game. It's sort of a game. You'll see that I was tagged in by fellow comics YouTuber, a friend of this channel, The Comic Board, and it's a pretty simple game. And he's adapting it from someone else who had this game for prose fiction, particularly for science fiction, and the Hugo Awards. I think it was the Hugo Awards, not the Nebula, but they went through the list of every Hugo winner and saw whether they had read that year's winner, and if they owned it, as if it was part of their home library. And they gave themselves 1 point for having read it and 1 point for having owned it. And owning it right now. And this is something that Blackpool over at the Comic Board adapted into comics by looking at the Eisner Awards. And of course, there are a number of categories that the Eisners have. The Eisners are often referred to as the Oscars of comics, and that's quite... I mean, it's not just a shorthand, but I think it's quite accurate. And it's accurate on a couple of different ways. As a comparison, the Academy Awards, Oscars for movies, and the Eisners do have some similarities that I think I'll be touching upon through the live stream. There are a number of nominations in each category. Sometimes those nominations vary in number from what I've seen. I haven't really followed the Eisners very closely until recently, but from what I can see, the categories have also changed over the years. So certain categories used to exist, certain categories, there have definitely been a number of categories that have been added over the years, and some categories that started out as one monolithic thing have been divided into two different ones or three different ones even, and in some cases they've been brought back into one category. So looking through the history of the Eisner Awards, it's quite entertaining, and it's also a nice little time capsule. I think the way that most awards are. So when you look back with the benefit of hindsight, it's sometimes interesting to see what was considered the best thing of that year by a particular group of people, maybe a guild or an academy or a society, whatever it may be. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it. I always think it's fun to look at the other nominations as well. But this game is just about the winners. So through the course of what I'm imagining is going to be a couple of hours, I'm going to go through each category's winner and then talk a little bit about whether I've read it or not, whether I own it or not, and also what my take on it is. I haven't really thought about how much time I want to spend on each book, but I know that since we're going from 1988 to 2021, that's a lot of years and a lot of winners, so maybe I'll just try to be fast. But I'll keep an eye on the chat, and if you want to take a closer look at something, or if we want to talk about something, if there's a question about something, Ashwita, as I said, is over there moderating. She'll highlight it. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. It's just a good excuse to spend some time talking about comics, which is a great thing, and it's great to be here with everyone. And I did think it would be a fun thing to do live, and I also wanted to show the books. First, I was thinking I'd just talk about them, because here at For the Love of Comics, some of you may not know, we have a playlist of videos on our collection, on our home library, shelf by shelf. So there's shelf 1, shelf 2, shelf 3. So in some ways, if I wanted to say, yes, I have this, I could just point you to the shelf video. That's video evidence if you doubted that was in my possession. But what's the fun in that? So today we decided that no, let's try and pull out as many of these books as we can find. And I think given the fact that we didn't have much time, it was a pretty good job. I think I'm missing a couple, but I think I'm only missing a couple. But I could maybe just tell you it's in that shelf video if you want to take a look at it. There might even be some books here and there in which I have a more detailed video, or I talk about in a level of detail greater than the ones I use in my shelf videos. So I'll see if I can note those as well. I see a lot of friends of the channel and regular viewers in the chat, so I'm sure some of them will be able to aid in identifying another video in which I talk about these books, if that happens. So that's one thing out of the way. What else did I want to say? Oh, yes. Before I get started, I think it won't surprise any long-time viewers. I do have a couple of caveats, although they may not be necessary. The first caveat is it's all in fun. This is just it's a fun little exercise. I don't want anyone to think that this is in any form flex or showing off or talking about like, oh, look at how much I have. And I did consider thinking that well, let's not have a point for owning the books, because I don't want it to come across as that way. It's just a thing. Someone tagged me. I enjoyed watching their video. It sounds like a fun idea. I've enjoyed these kind of things in the past, and I know that people do. So it's a purely fun little exercise to talk about which comics we've read and which ones we haven't, and in no way is it supposed to be in any way a form of talking about myself as a superior collector or reader or anything like that. And that's why the scorekeeping part of it shouldn't really be taken very seriously. As I said, it's just an excuse to talk about comics. And there are a lot of gaps in my reading and what I have, as will become evident as we go through this list. And I will then, talk about how big a gap that is. And that's my second thing, is the opposite of what I just said. It's also not meant to be in any way, I might say, oh, I'm ashamed I haven't read this. But again, that's just a joke in the context of things. There is nothing anyone should ever be ashamed of if they haven't gotten to reading something. There are lots of things to read. There are lots of things to enjoy. It's just, it's silly to think down on anyone because they haven't read something. So I really hope that it's a form of spotlighting things that are out there and things that we want to read and things that we want to get to and what we did think about the ones we read, and an exchange of opinions and desires and wishes of what we want to read, rather than any kind of shaming or any kind of showing off. So that sounds a little serious for this channel, but I thought I should just go ahead and mention that right at the top of this live stream, because we are going to be saying, oh, here's 1 point for me having read that, and here's 1 point for me owning that, and tally those points up. That's the entire point of this live stream. So I didn't want that to be taken in the wrong way, or please don't look at it from that point of view. I'm sure that everyone who's at least here in the live stream waiting for this was exactly of that mind. So they must be thinking it's a little silly of a disclaimer. But yeah, those are my caveats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Wikipedia and go through the page of winners. In fact, I followed a different link, and I'm going to use the page that has the other nominees as well. I'm not going to talk about the other nominees as far as whether I've read them. I mean, I might, but I always think it's fun to look at the nominees. So depending on how long it takes us to get through the full list, we may want to come back and talk about the nominees. We may even want to talk about them while we're going through those years, to say that, would I pick that as the over the others? Or, I haven't read that one, but I've read the other one, and this one must be really good because that one is fantastic. So to win over this, and I have another caveat. The other disclaimer is I'm not trying to say that awards are somehow really valuable as a barometer of what is worthwhile. I think they're interesting. I think they create discussion. I think there's a voyeuristic quality to them, but there's also the thing of disagreeing with them. There's a great pleasure in disagreeing with them, of thinking about something being snubbed, something being overrated, although I don't like the phrase overrated. I don't like that as a criticism, but you know what I mean. The disagreement has a certain pleasure, but all awards are limited. All awards are dissatisfactory as anything other than the best way we have of highlighting something worthwhile. It's really, for me, it's only about thinking about this is stuff that other people enjoy. This is stuff that people celebrated. My opinion of it and your opinion of it should be your own. It should be based solely on your own experience of reading it. So just because we're going through the Eisners and just because we're talking about what the winner was and who the other contenders were, that is in no way to say that there weren't many wonderful things that same year that could have been nominated. And this comes down to the kind of similarities between the Oscars and the Eisners I was talking about earlier. They will have certain limitations. Most specifically, I think in the case of the Eisners, like the Oscars, is that they are very US centric. And for different categories, best picture, best screenplay, best writer, best series, they tend to be very heavily skewed. And that's okay, because it is a US award. It is something that started being about the US market and what was selling over there. And there are categories that are about international books, and they are growing, and there are a number of different subcategories that have come up in recent years, and that's interesting, but that's not in any way comprehensive a look at the comics medium and things being published and in small presses, for example, or anywhere else in the world outside of the United States. And even in the United States, you can obviously always say that it has a bias towards certain publishers, it has a bias towards certain industry. I mean, these are just things that I think come with every awards, but it is worthwhile, I think, to note that as we go through these things, that it does have that bias within it, and we are within that. So when we're talking about the comics that we're talking about, we'll probably be talking mostly about American comics, although not always American creators. There will maybe be exceptions in this category. There might be more exceptions in other categories, but there might also be fewer exceptions in other categories. They might be completely dominated by US material. And that's just the nature of these awards. But I think that's a good thing to keep in mind as we go through this. Yes, exactly. The creators, they might come from everywhere. But yes, it is an American award from that particular point of view. All right, so I think that's enough. Is there any question that I want to get to before I jump into these books? Stream on Twitch? No, I have no idea about Twitch. I've heard about it, of course. All of my watching and all of my stuff is on YouTube right now, and I can barely manage that. Right. So, okay. So competition. It's a fun competition. What we're going to do, and let me see. And now this is the part again of the. Is it working? There, it's working. There we go. All right. So I have two screens up over here. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to tally my scores on a spreadsheet as we go through these categories one by one. I'll have some questions about how I should score, and I'll talk a little bit about how Blackpool scored the Eisners and the decisions he made, and I'm pretty much going to stick to all of them. So just to reiterate the rules, such as they are, you get 1 point for having read the work that is being mentioned. Now, in the Eisners, like some other awards I've seen in movies, I think, where the award is given for best writer is given for a number of works in that year. It may be for a single work, but it may also be for 2 or 3 works. So if you have read the work, and if there are 3 works that someone is receiving best writer of the year for, you get a separate point for each work that you have read, and a separate point for each work that you own. So you can score more than 2 points in a year, depending on how many works are cited for the winner. I think the National Board of Review in movies does the same thing. They give Best Actor for a couple of performances, or something similar to that. So that's the way we are going to score. I'm going to go through this spreadsheet, and I'm going to put in my score for that year. So say I score a 1. And then I also thought it would be interesting to track out of a possible, because I don't want this to be a competition between ourselves of like, oh, I scored this much, how much did you score? Although, of course, that's part of it. I also would like it to be a competition against myself. How much was it possible to score? Where are my gaps? So I want to see that difference. So that might be something interesting for you if you wanted to keep. But if you follow the same rules as I do, or if you're going by the same parameters, then whatever total I get out of a possible, you can just take that as being the total that your score would be out of, as long as you keep score for your own things in the same way. And I'll get to that as we get to a couple of categories where that might be different. We're like 15 minutes in and I'm already parched. this is going to be this is going to be a good one. And then there are certain things based on these rules that I'm following, set by Blackpool, that I'm not quite sure about, and there is a maybe over there. So let me explain the rules to you first, as far as what gets you a score. 1 second. All right, so you get 1 point for having read the work. You get 1 point for owning the work. If the work repeats in another year, you don't get additional points for that. So, for example, if you have the Sandman, and the Sandman wins again the next year, you don't count it again the next year. And I think that's fine. I think what happens over there is you've got 1 year for issues 1 through 6, and the next year for issues 7 through, it's because these are long runs and they're being published in single issue form in monthlies. You will have people winning. It's kind of like seasons of a TV show and Emmys and things like that. It's not the same thing. But if you've read the whole thing, you could say that, well, I want separate points for every year because I've read issues 1 through 6 that won in that year, and I've read issues 7 through 12 which won the next year. So over here, I think you could choose to say that, well, I want to count them all separately, and so therefore if there is a particular run that I haven't read, then I won't count that. But that includes a lot of research. I would have to go in and find out which issues are the ones that were in contention for this year and break it down like that. And that takes away the fun. So I think in the interest of having fun and in the interest of keeping things moving quickly and easily, if you've read one, you've read them all, is kind of the approach we're taking over there. And if that's not the case, you can be ethical when scoring yourself and decide that you're not going to give yourself a score for something else. But I would say basically that if the Sandman repeats, you're not going to get extra points for that. If a new work by the same author comes up, with the author winning Best Writer again, that will count. But once you've counted one thing, you don't get to count it again. And this will be for both columns. It will be not only for your score, but also possible. So it's not going to have another point as a possible score, because if it was already a possible, Sandman was already a possible score the year before. So over there, that will remain 0. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Way too hungover to do the scoring. That's fine. If you want, I can share the link to this Excel sheet and you can just put stuff in later and calculate. It's a very simple calculation. All right. I am, I think, ready to go. 1 second. Okay, let's get started. Well, yes, I could have just counted on my fingers, but, screen sharing, got to use the medium. I wanted to try this, and it seems to be working all right so far. All right, so Eisner Award for Best Writer. A little bit of general knowledge. The Eisner Award, like the Oscar Award, isn't its official name. The name is, hold on, now I can't get it. It's the industry, the comic industry. It's a great way to start. Well, I don't get that pop-up, but it's the Eisner is the short form for this. And the first year that the Best Writer Award was given out was 1988. And the winner was Alan Moore for Watchmen. And we start off well because, yes, I have read Watchmen and I do own Watchmen. I own, it's a good thing that we're not keeping score for the number of editions you have of a work, because I think that would be a slightly different level. And I wouldn't be sure if I'd be happy or embarrassed about putting that score out there in public. So I mean, maybe that's a version you can play if you want to add a point for every edition, if you have it in the singles, if you have the trade paperback, the deluxe, the international hardcover, the absolute. So I have videos on Watchmen, and that's the thing that I think huge channels could play. They could see how many of these winners they've made videos on. I certainly wouldn't be able to do that, but that's another way to do it if you are a YouTuber who wants to try this game. So Watchmen is a yes. I love Watchmen. I think this is a comic that really holds up. It has a tremendous reputation. So there's always a question of, well, maybe it was great at that time. Maybe it was great in 1988, but after everything that's come after it, and even things that have been inspired by it, does it hold up? And it holds up. It holds up because of its attention to detail and because of its interest in a very particular type of story where that let's make superheroes real isn't... it's just the beginning of what it means to have a particular psychology and what being a superhero actually entails within you psychologically. That's the part of Watchmen that I don't think will ever get old. And the fact that you can go back and forth arguing about who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, who's to be emulated and not emulated. No one is to be emulated, but the idea that you can make such a compelling story of not just anti-heroes, but people who are flawed in every way that you would have to be in order to be that superhero, I don't think that has been done even now as well and as in depth. And everything else in it, the texture and the depth of it, you know I'm a fan of Watchmen. It really is one of my favorite comics, and I think the Absolute edition is a beautiful edition to have it in. I do like the original colors. I do like the I don't know, the cheapness, the luridness of those colors, and they work well, but I like the remaster of the Absolute Edition as well, and having it at that size and having it with those extras, which I believe are out there in most other editions these days. It's just a fantastic package on comics and on making comics and where comics can go. Perfectly fantastic, absolutely deserving, I would say, of the very first Eisner for Best Writer. So Alan Moore, Watchmen, I got to keep score. So I own it and I have read it. So that's a 2 out of a possible 2. All right, so this is tallying up over here, and it'll keep tallying as I go down automatically. Or should I turn that off? Should we only tally it right at the end and not have it automatically update? Let me know in the comments if you want me to turn it off. I'm just going to update it automatically for now. So yes to the having read, yes to the owning, yes to the making videos, yes to multiple editions. Watchmen is a good start for us on this game. 1989. Alan Moore, The Killing Joke. Well, The Killing Joke, that's an interesting one. I have read The Killing Joke. I actually, maybe of all the comics I'm going to talk about today, The Killing Joke is the first of them that I read, because I read The Killing Joke when I was 13 years old, and it destroyed my fragile little mind. It's not the right age to be reading The Killing Joke, and especially not at that time. I think maybe kids have been exposed to many more things, but I was not. I was a sheltered little kid, and it's not like I'd only seen Adam West Batman or something. In fact, I had never seen Adam West Batman. I knew Batman from these good 70s stories, stuff by Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, and where he's fighting the gentleman ghost. I mean, these are good Batman stories, but The Killing Joke was I don't think it ages that well, though. As much as it blew my mind at that age, I have not found time within myself to be kind to The Killing Joke. So here is my copy of the first. This is the Prestige edition. This is the original edition of it. I picked this up for 100 rupees on the footpath of Kolkata, at where they sell magazines and comics and things like that. And I'm really glad to have it. I have this also in a couple of different editions. I have this in the Absolute, and I like the Absolute because it has the original colors and it has the new colors. I know a lot of people don't like the new colors of The Killing Joke. I just wish the Absolute was in the form factor of Absolute Year One, Batman Year One. The 2 volumes, the 2 slim hardcover volumes in a slipcase, that would have been fantastic. But The Killing Joke is a good enough comic. I think it's a little too mean, but not just mean because bad things happen in it. That's fine. I mean, I've we've all read comics in which horrible things happen, and horrible things happen to good people. That's not it. It's just like, I don't today, as an adult, understand the point of the story the way I did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, just the Joker wanting to destroy sanity was good enough. That's what it is. And how much more do you want in something this slim? Over the years, I've found myself less compelled by the larger story and more by the individual moments and the kind of craft that exists in this book. And also, as a 13-year-old, I mean, well, Barbara Gordon being shot obviously is the terrific searing image, and I think it's because of the blood splatter from behind her in silhouette. Not very graphic, but very graphic in many ways, because that exit wound isn't something you see. So for 13-year-old me, that bullet was like unlike any other bullet. I mean, even the front shot is pretty gory, but just the idea that the exit wound exists and you can see that splatter, it's like watching, Sam Peckinpah or something like that. It's a different kind of thing, and I hadn't seen that in a comic, and I hadn't definitely not thought it was going to be something I would see in a Batman comic. So that kind of stuff, is definitely burned into my brain. But more than that, I think, are the kind of transitions that this has. And it's very similar to Watchmen, and it's interesting that it's the year after Watchmen, where this would be the last panel on this page, and the first panel on the next page would be exactly that, but flashback. So that sort of match cut across time to take you from where you are to the origin story. And that happens a couple of times, and it's very effective. And I know that it even as a young child, that registered to me. This is him down here and Gordon up here, the same pose, moving across time and location to take you there. And this is something, as I said, in Watchmen, you've seen Dave Gibbons do that with Alan Moore's script, most particularly in the funeral, Absent Friends, the funeral issue, where you go into the backstories of each of them at Eddie Blake's funeral. And that's something. So The Killing Joke is after Watchmen, a year apart. So I'm guessing that they were being worked on at the same time, or The Killing Joke was being worked on towards Watchmen's end or middle. Those similarities in it, I read The Killing Joke years before I read Watchmen. So when I finally did read Watchmen, I felt that memory of reconnecting these match cuts, and I was like, oh, I've seen this somewhere before. So I'm unstuck in time as far as that's concerned. The other thing about The Killing Joke, the thing that really resonates with me, is this sequence in which they eat crawfish at this dive bar. This is where he's roped into the job to be the Red Hood, which leads to the accident and so on and so forth. And this whole sequence in this orange light, and with them peeling the legs of the crawfish and then sucking their heads off and the shells. I mean, when I was young, I had never seen anything being eaten in this manner. I didn't know what crawfish were. And the way that this scene makes you feel uneasy, and the way the bad guys roping him into this job, the way they're devouring this. We've seen this with villains and, bad guys eating. That's always a way to express how villainous they are. But this, because the crawfish have legs and antenna, and they're breaking their heads off and popping into the mouth and sucking it, just felt like this extra level of yucky, disgusting. And many years later, I actually found myself at a Louisiana crawfish boil, where you have these troughs full of crawfish, and you just take this plastic tray and push it in, and then go sit on the grass somewhere and break them. And I enjoyed the crawfish. I enjoyed that whole experience, in fact. It was fantastic. But at the very beginning, into my brain did flash The Killing Joke. So it made an impression on me. Not quite as at the same level as Watchmen for me today, but definitely much more than Watchmen for me when I first read it, although that's not really fair. So, score-wise, oh wait, I need to change the screen. There we go. All right, 1988, 1989, both doing rather well, with 2 out of a possible 2, and this is looking good, and this is looking good because it's Alan Moore, and it's for the love of comics, and I'm a big Alan Moore fan. So probably Alan Moore is the Katharine Hepburn or the Meryl Streep of the Eisners, at least the best writer Eisner, I'm pretty sure. So that is what is going to stand me in good stead. Wow, we're only in 1989. Am I taking too long? Should I just move past these things a little faster? I didn't get the joke. Yes, it was... yeah, what was the joke about also? You know, it's like even the joke in Short Circuit had a little bit more plot weight than the joke the Joker tells the Batman in The Killing Joke. But that's just my opinion. All right, so 1989, 1988, done. These are good nominations. You see what I'm talking about? I have not read Nexus. Talk about like big holes. I mean, everyone tells me Nexus is fantastic. I've never read Nexus, not a single issue of Nexus. But Concrete and Grendel up against Alan Moore the next year. Nexus again. William Messner Loeb's for Johnny Quest. Now, see, immediately I was like, I never knew that I wanted to read Johnny Quest comics, and just in the last couple of weeks, it's come up a couple of times, including that criticism of Steve Rude by I'm blanking now, Alex Toth, which was also on a Johnny Quest comic. So now I'm just like, wow, is Johnny Quest the hidden unknown thing in comics that we should be all looking at? Grant Morrison's Animal Man and Ann Nocenti's Daredevil. Ann Nocenti? I'm not sure how that's pronounced. I've not read that. Okay, so after 1988 and 1989, 1990, there was no Eisner Awards ceremony or awards distributed because of widespread balloting mix-ups. So just no Eisner Awards in 1990. All right, so 1991, Neil Gaiman, The Sandman. Well, there we go. So much for the American thing, as someone was commenting. But yeah, you know, but there's the DC comics, of course. All right, so The Sandman, of course, I have read The Sandman. I love The Sandman. I've made videos on The Sandman, videos on the Absolute editions, the first 20 single issues. I have it in a variety of forms, and I really enjoy it. I don't think it's the most consistent series, and I also think that there are a lot of criticisms of it that I've heard that I think are perfectly valid criticisms, including criticisms of the art. But I also think, at least in my opinion, that what it achieves is so significant and is so masterfully done at certain levels when it comes to a certain kind of mythic, epic storytelling, intertextuality, weaving in things that exist, borrowing from things that have always been there, but trying to weave it in together to make something completely new. I think that Sandman has a bit of a shaky start, although in recent revisitations, rereading it with my wife, it's less shaky than I remember it. I think when I was first reading it, I was about to give up on The Sandman in its initial issues. Actually, it was 24 Hours in the Diner that made me stick around, and then number 8 with Death that made me stick around, and then it got really good. But this time around, I think even in the initial stories, there's a lot to be admired. And I think when it's fantastic, which I think happens maybe more with the short stories and the more anecdotal pieces of the Sandman than some of the longer arcs. Although some of the longer arcs, my favorite longer arc is a road trip, right towards the end of the series. Brief Lives was just terrific. I had a fantastic time reading Brief Lives, and I thought the characters and the way they played off of each other, what they were doing, and how it was familiar and unfamiliar. So that long arc, I think, is one of the most delightful kind of reads I've had in comics. But the short stories and the little pieces that are on the periphery in the ones that Morpheus may not even appear or is just alluded to, are terrific short stories, and they're wonderfully woven into the larger fabric and texture of what's being done. So I think that the Sandman is completely worthwhile, although I will, I'll completely agree with other people who will point to certain problems and issues with its structure or with its characterization. I mean, I don't say that they're nitpicks. I just think that its triumphs and its achievements outweigh those other ones. But look at 1991. That's a lot of nominees, probably because in 1990 they didn't have an award. But it's you've got Gilbert Hernandez and Scott McCloud and Frank Miller and Alan Moore and Dave Sim, Grant Morrison, all competing for... I have not read... I don't know what this is. Maybe someone in the chat will be able to identify what Steve Gerber is nominated for here, or what James Vance is nominated for here. Grant Morrison, I'm thinking, is Animal Man. Wasn't he? Yeah, well, there's Animal Man in 89 as well. So, but all right. So there we go. That is... 1990 is nothing, so that's 0 score, but also 0 possible since there's no award. And we'll say I have read the Sandman, I do own the Sandman. All right, we are doing well so far. Okay, good. All right, moving along. 92, it is The Sandman, Books of Magic, and Miracle Man, 3 works for which Neil Gaiman once again wins Best Writer. So, The Sandman, I have already talked about. Miracle Man, I have not read. I have not read Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man. I have not read even a single issue of it. I've heard it's supposed to be good, and I think it's Mark Buckingham on art duties, or... someone like that, someone famous, but I haven't. In fact, and this is probably my big embarrassing admission for the evening as well, I haven't even read all of Alan Moore's. I've only read the first 2 volumes. So Miracle Man is one big hole in my comics reading. I enjoyed what I read of Alan Moore's, and it was getting better. I had a problem finding the volumes, but that's just an excuse. I should have gotten back to it by now. But that's Alan Moore. He's not the winner in 1992. It is Neil Gaiman for The Sandman, which I've already counted. Books of Magic, which I have read and I do own, and I think I had pulled out somewhere. There we go. Books of Magic by Neil Gaiman, which which I enjoyed. There's a boy wizard with glasses and an owl. See, that's the joke. It's nothing like Harry Potter, really, apart from those 3 superficial similarities, other than the fact that both Gaiman and Rowling, I'm guessing, are well read in other works of fiction and can weave those into the story they're telling. I enjoyed the Books of Magic. I never picked up more than the original miniseries, which I'm guessing is what is being talked about over here. And I thought the artwork was very interesting, and I was very happy to see the number of different kinds of conversations that we had. It wasn't absolutely thrilling, I will have to say, but it's been a long time since I read it. I got this just when I had finished reading The Sandman, and I was looking for a few more things in that sort of realm, but also other things by Neil Gaiman, because I'd read prose by Neil Gaiman and I'd enjoyed it, but not really been blown away. And The Sandman I thought was really good, and I thought that Sandman was better than any of the prose that I'd read by him thus far. So I wanted to read other comics by him. I thought maybe he's a really good comics writer when he's collaborating with artists, etc., which I'm sure many people will agree enthusiastically that he is. So here we go, Books of Magic, but I have no Miracle Man, and I have not read Miracle Man. So that means that as far as my scoring goes, my perfect score run is gone. So Sandman doesn't count. So I get 1 for reading and 1 for owning. And out of a possible, and in this case it would be 4 because Sandman's already been counted before. So for reading Books of Magic and for reading Miracle Man and for owning them, it would have been 4. So 2 out of a possible 4 in 1992. All right, not too bad. This is still, I'm happy about this, and I'm guessing that this is going to, be the case for a while because I've looked at this list before trying to put these books together, and yes, 1993, Neil Gaiman, Miracle Man, The Sandman, both having been counted before. The other nominations, Peter Bagg, Sarah Byam. I do not know Sarah Byam. Billy 99, Dark Horse. I don't know this comic. See? Alan Moore from Hell, Lost Girls. Ooh, I should be able to trade Lost Girls for Miracle Man. Somehow do that. Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. Harvey Picar's American Splendor. And Dave Sim. Look at that lineup. What a bunch of cool people. I'm guessing the same applies to Sarah Byam. Well, Dave Sim, I don't think, unfortunately, is no longer a cool person. His work over here, again, I have not read Cerebus. I read the first 6 stories, but I hear that it gets really good after that. It's only reputational, and never got to read High Society and the works that come after that. So that was 92. 93, I guess, is us putting that down as 0-0 because they were both mentioned before, so nothing additional was possible. All right, back to the list. 94. Oh, look, it's Neil Gaiman. The Sandman, once again, and Death, the High Cost of Living, which I have read, which I did enjoy. I did not, as I was saying earlier, when I looked up other Neil Gaiman comics and saw what else he had, I read a bunch of them. I read older stuff, I read newer stuff, etc. I wasn't sold on a whole lot of them, and they weren't necessarily, to me, as good as the Sandman, but the High Cost of Living was good. I enjoyed it, so I have it in this form. It is also, of course, hold on, let me see if I've got there we go. In the single issues, it's lovely to read in this way. It's also part of the Death Absolute, so you can get this with the High Cost of Living and what was it? The Time of Your Life? No, what am I saying? It's late, it's Sunday, but I enjoyed both the Death stories. I enjoyed Death as a character, and I thought that she was well used in the series, which is not too much and just enough. So I was a little, I would have to say, worried about reading a series about her, because I thought maybe she's one of those characters who's best in small doses, and luckily these stories were, I felt, sensitively enough written, but with a nice atmosphere. I did not like Endless Nights, for example, which was a continuation that Gaiman did of the Sandman stories, but this was different. So at least, even though I don't have Miracle Man, at least I will be able to count Death, the High Cost of Living for 1994. Oh well, Miracle Man wasn't up that year anyway. So 1994, 2 possible because obviously the Sandman has already been done. So 2 possible as well as 2 scored for having read and having owned. All right, moving on to 1995. 1990. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Alan Moore, an up-and-comer. Never heard that name before. From Hell, from Kitchen Sink. Alan Moore returns in 1995 with I know some of you might know this already, but From Hell is my favorite Alan Moore work. There are a couple that come close, and every now and then I think, am I going to redo that list? But every time I have returned to it, every time I have read it, I found it to be stupendous. It is just, in my opinion, it is just such an incredible achievement in comics because of Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell working together like magic. The historical research, if you want to call it that, I'm not interested in it as did it really tell me who Jack the Ripper is, and I don't care about that part of it, as in, who is he really, etc. What I care about is the manner in which this story, which is supposed to be about this thing, is about all of it. It's just the way that Alan Moore likes to write it. So he wants to write about the 20th century and the birth of the 20th century and evil and humans. And he does it through the Jack the Ripper story in a way that feels grimy and dirty and bloody, but also sort of ecstatic. It's like that William Blake sort of like those things that happen in it is like, is it a vision? And then what is this manifesting at? Is serial murder and gruesome dismemberment? It's just an incredible thing to want to achieve, and then to pull it off with the kind of strength that he does makes it just a fantastic work. I will have to one day finally tackle it and talk about why I think From Hell is such a great book, or at least why it's my favorite Alan Moore work. But at this point of time, that's the best I can do. Hold up, where is it? So here we are, Alan Moore's From Hell. It was originally published by Tundra and then moved over to... No, it's the other way around. It's Mad Love was their imprint in the UK. And it had a rocky publication history because of Kitchen Sink Press going out of business and it having to continue. But it... as a series, you don't feel a hiccup, you don't feel any publication. And I don't know if everyone has seen Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell's From Hell. It is this scratchy, I don't know, ink, pen style to show you Victorian England, the shadows and the conspiracies and the streets and the squalor, and as well as the very rich people, in a way that seems unlike anything else I've still seen today in comics. It doesn't feel like I've seen that life in movies, television, ever depicted in the way that this makes me feel about that time. Another comic, because of my fandom of it and Alan Moore, I have in multiple editions, most recently the colorized master edition, which is interesting, and maybe one day I'll do a comparison and talk about that. I like the colorization as an experiment, and I'm never going to second guess Eddie Campbell, who only wanted to do a new edition of it if he could do something like that, because he felt it would change it, it would transform the story. So I'm happy that it exists, but for me, the original black and white is fantastic. It's just it's eerily terrific, and another winner, so to speak, that I completely agree with and think holds up perfectly. I mean, today I would read From Hell and be just as impressed by it, I think, as I've always been. And that's not always something that happens. Like even with Alan Moore and The Killing Joke, it doesn't necessarily, just because you had one particular experience doesn't mean that it'll always repeat. But when it does and it echoes and it gets deeper in some ways, then you know that you found something marvelous. So that's 1995 From Hell. That's 2 for reading and owning. How's everyone else doing? Are you guys keeping score? Is everyone still here? Is everyone gone off to bed? Let's see. Yes, gateway choice for Ashwita, my wife. She From Hell is one of the first comics, graphic novels, grown-up comics that she ever read, and she was hooked, and she really loved it. And she's coming from not from a comics reading background, but from a completely different reading background. So that's another reason why I think, in spite of its density and in spite of its complexity, it does make a good gateway comic for people who like to read dense and complex things. And it makes a great gateway comic for someone who likes history and politics and conspiracy and things like that done seriously, but didn't know that comics could do it. And then you give them the comics and say, look, this is stuff that you would appreciate in prose and you would appreciate in film, so you'll probably appreciate this in comics. So from that point of view, I do think that it's a great gateway for people who like to read, who like to challenge themselves. Okay, so Icon from Milestone by Dwayne McDuffie is not a comic I've read. I have recently, I think in particular, heard a lot about Dwayne McDuffie and Icon, but I've never ever read it. Harvey P. Carr, American Splendor, including... Oh, see? I could have gotten a couple of different points over here if it had been Harvey P. Carr winning. James Robinson for Starman, and Sandman Mystery Theater also. Yep. All right, 1996, also Alan Moore, also From Hell. Now, as we discussed, these might have been separate parts of the story and separate issues, but just like the Sandman and everything else, we are not counting this, so it's 0 points out of a possible 0, because From Hell has already been counted. Ooh, Kurt Busiek, Garth Ennis, Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison. Now look at that. That's a rock star lineup right there. 1997, Alan Moore, From Hell. Again, cancelling points because it's already been done. And Supreme from Maximum Press. Supreme from Maximum Press is something that I have read and have really, really enjoyed. I have not been able to get my hands on the trade paperback, which is how I first read it at a friend's place. And it was Supreme and Supreme The Return, the story of the year. So the sequel. So he had these two trade paperbacks, and they were just falling apart. I mean, like, almost every page had come off the binding. And he said it was the worst bound book. I think it was the first volume or something that he had ever bought in his life. But the story was so good that he had it. And so I had to read it sort of, page by page, picking it up as if picking up stuff from a portfolio. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a terrific story with things in it that Alan Moore would do more of later. He would explore these things in Tom Strong and League of Extraordinary, Tom Strong in particular. And Chris Prowse was an artist I first encountered in Supreme. So later, when I started buying trade paperbacks and comics, I went looking for those trade paperbacks and for Supreme, because I'd read them many years ago and I couldn't find them. And to a certain extent, I was relieved, because I was like, man, those were horrible. They were falling apart. But I was able to pick up every copy of Alan Moore's run in singles for not very much, and it's completely worth it. This series has the idea of revisions. It has the idea of superhero mythology and the retconning of DC Marvel universes, but what Superman stands for, all done through this proxy character that many years after that I learned was a Rob Liefeld creation, and and I actually picked up a couple of those comics as well. Anyway, I couldn't believe that these were the same characters. So much more drastically, I think, than he did with the Swamp Thing, which is what Alan Moore is famous for, of how he changed and adjusted and transformed the Swamp Thing from what it was originally to what it later became. This makes that look like a faithful continuation of the Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson series. This is a radical departure from the gritted teeth, dialogue spouting, muscle-bound Supreme that I saw in those, to this very funny, very heartfelt, very wise, and very comics knowledgeable story about comics superheroes and their roles in storytelling, done in so many different art styles. And this is the thing that I saw later Chris Sprouse bring to Tom Strong many years later, this ability to quickly go into a golden age art style for a story set in the past. And that kind of visual metafiction works perfectly with Alan Moore's Skippy. And from what I could see in the beginning of Miracle Man, that's where it started. So you have that kind of storytelling where the comic art changes according to the period you're in, but the period you're in is being represented through the comic art of that period. So therefore the storytelling is as broad or as shallow as it was in that period. And that combination, I think, just like you have in Miracle Man and just like you have in Tom Strong, in very different ways, is I think the middle part of that is Alan Moore Supreme, which I'm very happy to have and very glad to be able to. I've never seen it collected. Again, I don't know if are there rights issues or something like that. I keep thinking that surely they will one day bring out some nice hardcovers or even another trade paperback, because it's just not available, or maybe I'm out of touch. But anyway, I'm glad to have the singles. I'm glad to have Supreme, and I'm particularly glad to have Supreme because I think that makes for a good thing to score points on over here. That might have been, but I can't count From Hell, right? Yes, because From Hell was counted in 96. So in 97, I am going to count Supreme, and I'm going to say I got 2 points out of a possible 2 for reading and owning. How are we doing? Good stuff? Badrock and Violator miniseries. All right, I'm going to have to look that up if Supreme is a step down from that. How interesting. All right, where were we? All right, 1997. 1998. Garth Ennis for Hitman, Preacher, Unknown Soldier, and Bloody Mary, Lady Liberty. 4 titles. That means that if you have read and own each of these, there's 8 points up for grabs. And I am going to score. This is not a good year. This is not a good year for me. Oh, I can see Scott McCloud right down there. I can see Kurt Busiek. Oh, but Garth Ennis. My weaknesses are going to start showing now. So I have never read Hitman. I've never read it. Forget owning it. I know it's great. I know people love it. There are some people in the chat right now who have been clamoring for a Hitman omnibus for ages. Even if it comes out as an omnibus, it's going to then be an omnibus, and I'm going to have to think about whether I want to get an omnibus, because I just don't read omnibuses, and it's difficult to find Hitman in any other physical form. Now, could it be that this is one of those things that has been so hyped up that when I read it, I will not actually enjoy it, or at least not as much as people who have said? It's possible, but, after a while you start trusting certain people and tastes. There can always be variations, but at this point of time, I've heard enough about Hitman to think it's probably very good, and I should probably give it a shot. And I'll be willing to, if it were available, to buy, even in trade paperbacks. But an omnibus, if that's the only way it goes, that's the way it goes, and I'll get it. I mean, I still haven't read Planetary because I bought it in that big fat omnibus. And I just don't want to read that omnibus. I should have just held out for when I would have been able to find 6 volumes of Planetary, because I would have read it by now. So it's kind of weird, and I don't like having books that just sit on the shelves and I don't read them, and I am not looking forward to reading them. That's what I'm worried about will happen with Hitman, is that there'll be an omnibus. That'll be the only way to get it, and I'll get it and I won't read it. So, but that's a lot of thinking to do about something that is basically haven't read it, don't own it, 0 points. I also have not read Unknown Soldier, and I don't own it. I have not read and do not own Bloody Mary, Lady Liberty. So, thank you, Preacher. It's the only thing that keeps me from being skunked in 1998. So, I have read Preacher. I do own it. I think it's really good. I think it may not be as good as I remember it being, so I'm a little wary of returning to it. I wasn't, falling over myself to get to the absolute editions, but also because they're big. I'm not, as I was just saying, but I know that when I was reading Preacher for the first time, it was an almost transcendental experience for me. It was unlike anything I had read in comics. It felt gloriously and deliciously profane. It really seemed to revel in it, but it wasn't only about it. Had serious questions on its mind. It wanted to know about God, and it wanted to talk about God or interrogate God, and the kind of characters and the kind of relationships that were built up, particularly the central triangle, was really compelling. So I think there are certain things that happen later in the story and certain comeuppances, etc., that felt very satisfactory at a certain age or at a certain mindset that maybe I have a strong suspicion maybe I won't feel that way about anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'll return to it one day. I do have the entire series in trade paperback. It's great. Right at the beginning, I'll say this for Preacher, that when there is when we've just started the story, you're getting this drunk preacher or this hungover preacher. He's getting beaten up in a bar. You think you know what that story is, and then you turn the page, and then you see this. And that's, that thing over there, and that one caption box saying heaven, I was hooked there. I was just like, this is a great jump cut, smash cut, whatever you want to call it. I thought I was in this type of story. It wasn't too long. It was just a couple of pages. And then the story is something else altogether. And the casualness and the slightly sci-fi bit, all of it mixed together to make for a terrific hook. And so this is one of those Vertigo series that I just sort of galloped through. So I had a great time reading Preacher. I really loved it. I wonder if I would love it as much if I return to it today. But it's there, so maybe I will one day, and then maybe I'll make a video on it and say, how was it to return to the Preacher? But at this point of time, my heart is full of love for Preacher, because it prevented me, as I said, from wiping out completely in 1998. So out of a possible 8, unfortunately 1998 yields me only 2. I guess I should read some Hitman. And I don't know, I've never heard of Lady Liberty. Is that good? Is that something I should look into? Let's see. Anyway, 98 is behind us. 1999, Kurt Busiek's Astro City and The Avengers. I have not read Kurt Busiek's The Avengers. I don't think. No, I haven't. I have read Kurt Busiek's Astro City. I love Astro City. Astro City is my favorite. It probably is my favorite superhero series, like a long-running, continuing superhero series. It is by the same creators all through its long runs, so that, I think, has a lot to do with it. A lot of my favorite long runs by the same team or by the same creator, they tend to be that way anyway. But Astro City, I've talked about it many times in my videos. I've featured it in a couple of my videos. Did I find something? Astro City is, if you haven't read it, Astro City's first volume, Life in the Big City, is one of the most beautiful starts to a series that I've ever read. This is a collection of short stories. So the first 6 issues were 6 standalone stories set in this world of Astro City. And Astro City is a city in which superheroes are common, and they're around. So it's not like everyone's a superhero the way it is in Top 10, or everyone has superpowers the way it is in Top 10. It's not that. It's just common. And this is something that I think may be more common in comics these days. I don't think it was when I read it. At least I hadn't experienced anything like that. And the approach to the superheroes over here, so here's your Clark Kent type. Instead of being a reporter, he's a cartoonist. He's a comics artist. And he is the Superman archetype called the Samaritan. And that's the first issue. And from the very first issue, which I'm not going to spoil, but it's not a spoiler. Like, there's no plotty, naughty stuff. It's just the way it looks at superheroes and the stories that it has about superheroes. A lot of Astro City stories are about the common man or the everyday folk on the street. But even when it's talking about the superheroes, when it's centered on them and they are the subject of 4 of these stories, I think, even then it's more human parts of them and the human desires and the human wishes and the human problems they have, rather than the superhuman ones. And the ones that are looking at them sort of obliquely, that the superheroes are there in the distance and I am this person over here, are just terrific. And they do stories about moving on with your life, about journalism and ethics. The topics are so varied, but they all have to do with this city and this pantheon of heroes, which, as the years go by, this pantheon expands. And part of the pleasure of reading Astro City is going along with that expansion of the universe. The other interesting thing about Astro City is that not only is the first volume a collection of standalone short stories that you can obviously read without having anything else. It's the first volume, but so is the third volume, so is the fifth volume, so is the seventh volume. It has a lot of short stories, and it almost alternates, or it used to, at least in the first 5 or 6, 7 volumes, it used to alternate between having a series of short stories and then a longer arc, then a series of short stories and a longer arc, and they all sort of interconnected with each other but stood alone. It's marvelous, textured, mythic storytelling that I cannot praise highly enough. So, yes, I have Astro City. Yes, I've read Astro City, and I will continue to do so as long as the creators choose to publish this. It's a series that has earned my trust with its incredible consistency. And so, although I do not have the Avengers in 1999, I'm happy to put down 2 points for having read and own Astro City. I think I have all. I think I might be missing one of the last Vertigo volumes, but I'm counting it because I definitely not thing unfortunately, out of a possible 4. So I have not read or owned the Avengers, and so 2 out of 4 in 1999. All right, how are we doing? Should we look into the chat, see if there are any questions for me? Ashwita, are there any questions for me over here? Okay, I guess not. Yes, I did hear the same thing that Sleepy Reader High is pointing out, that there was conversation about them not doing single issues anymore at all and just bringing out Astro City in, because these sell way more than the single issues do, the collected editions. And a lot of people just wait for the collected editions and then they go out of print because they don't know, because their demand for the collected edition print run is probably being based on the single issue sales. And it's all very... well, I would think it's simple, but it's actually kind of complicated. So I think they are going to move to Image, Brent Anderson and Kurt Busiek. And I believe at Image, they may not, in fact, bring out single issues. I think they might just go straight into books. But I don't know if that's something Image has done before or not. So maybe I'm confusing those two things. I would love to see Astro City continue in any form. I've been such a fan over the years. I've collected the single issues, even though I have those volumes, because I like reading those single stories in that single issue form, and I like binging the longer stories in that form. But yeah, I hope they continue for a long time. Okay, what else did we have in 1999? We had Jeff Loeb for Superman for All Seasons, Greg Rucka for Whiteout. I have not read Whiteout. Steven Seagal for Drive-By. Ooh, I have not read Drive-By. Sandman Mystery Theater. I have read Matt Wagner's Grendel. Read Black, White, and Red. I don't think I've read Black, White, and Red. Not that one, but anyway, we're not talking about these guys. We were talking about Kurt Busiek. 2 out of 4. We are now moving on to the 2000s. Hey, it's Alan Moore. And Alan Moore was feeling bad for me, missing out on all these points thanks to Kurt Busiek's Avengers and the body blow dealt by Garth Ennis in taking, 6 points out of my possibility. Alan Moore, my friend, has come to my rescue with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Prometheus, Tom Strong, Tomorrow Stories, and Top 10. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 series. Which this is a phenomenal thing that Alan Moore did. He wrote all 5 series at the same time. This is 1 year, the year 2000, that he's being nominated and winning this award. He is writing 5 concurrent series in America's Best Comics, and I personally feel that America's Best Comics was some sort of a pinnacle for Alan Moore. There are more serious works that he's done. There are more literary works that he's done. There are more widely renowned, critically even, works than the stuff that he did in the America's Best Comics line. But I think America's Best Comics were really, really good comics. I think in all of them, there's a fair amount to recommend, and in some of them they're just fantastic. They're not all great all the time, but when they're good, they're terrific. So League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, yes, I have read it. I do own it. It is a great series. It's got some weird parts in it, so to be perfectly honest, the Black Dossier is not to my liking, although I understand what he's trying to do, and I do admire how much he weaves in. But the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the beginning, the first story, even the second arc, the first arc, are terrific steampunk sci-fi stories that bring together these literary characters into a band of superheroes who are covertly working for the British government, but they're all enemies of the crown. So Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he's a wanted man by the crown. Mina Murray from Bram Stoker's Dracula is roped in to be the lead. It's not Alan Quatermain. It's these Haley Griffin, the Invisible Man, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, of course. So the Incredible Hulk and the Invisible Man. It's that kind of a team up, but it is so much more because it's interested again in the nature of storytelling, the politics of narrator, and it's ridiculously good. It does help if you are a fan of those books, because you get a lot of the jokes and remarks, but I think anyone can read it and feel quite smart, because this book makes you feel smart because it takes these things that you're familiar with and does new things with them. So the first volume of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the second volume, which is a War of the Worlds story, so H.G. Wells, another H.G. Wells story after The Invisible Man also comes into this world. And then this entire series continues for a long time, and it has its lows and highs, but I still think it's a completely worthwhile series. So League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is definitely something I have read and own. Prometheus is also another really interesting, epic, ambitious series by Alan Moore, featuring some absolutely gorgeous art by J.H. Williams III. A lot of them, particularly I think in the later stories end up being just double page spread after double page spread. Like, they're all 2-page compositions, even if they're not technically double page spreads and I have multiple panels in them, but you need to be looking at both pages together for that. And this is really the there's a lot in the storytelling that I think we see later in stuff like Fables, but done in a much more uncompromising, I think, if that's the right word, way, where it is, I think all of Alan Moore's stuff, especially these America's Best Comics, they really give credit to the reader. They trust the reader to be smart or intelligent or to put 2 and 2 together and come up with their own things. It's that kind of respect for the reader that I really appreciate. Prometheus still isn't one of my favorite of these America's Best Comics lineup. As I said, it's absolutely worthwhile. It's got a great fantasy, cosmic, dimension, parallel universes type of storytelling that is extremely well pulled off. The characters for me are not as interesting as some of these other stories have them, but this series, I think, is a wonderful series. So yeah, that's another of those that I have read and own. And then we have Tom Strong, one of my favorites. This is a great series. This doesn't get talked about enough, I think. Maybe some others get more press for whatever reason. This, the best thing I can say about Tom Strong is when I was reading Tom Strong as an adult, I was a child reading comics, for the first time, is that it captured my childhood love of superheroes and comics in a way that no other comic, I think, has. A lot of comics reference them, and I appreciate the references, and I appreciate the nostalgia nods, but they're adults remembering things they liked as children. This makes me feel like I'm a child again. It's a subtle difference, but it was a significant one for me, because the earnestness of the storytelling in the art and the writing both is unmistakable. It's clean and it is ambitious. It is fun. It is tongue-in-cheek. It takes itself seriously. When it wants to talk about threats to the world, it takes itself not so seriously when those threats to the world are some ridiculous thing that has just been created by these people messing up something. It's got a perfect balance, I think, between the gee whiz optimism and like adventure storytelling. It never gets so dark. It never gets so ugly that you feel whiplash. It just takes you there and then comes back, and it really is a series worthy of more mention. So I love Tom Strong. I'm glad that this is one of the works that Alan Moore wins for. So that's 3 over there. And then we have Tomorrow Stories. What do you think? That's Tomorrow Stories by Alan Moore from America's Best Comics. I have all the America's Best Comics and I love them all. As I said, they're different ranges, but this is an anthology series that was terrific. You can pick up any issue and read any story. They did end up having some weird connections and relations to some other stories in this in I wouldn't say this universe, because they occupy very, very different things. You can't have a crossover between their things. But there's some weird things in here that are very rewarding to people reading these things. And it's a fun read by itself, and some great collaborators in this anthology series. So that's Tomorrow Stories. And of course, the 5th one over here for this year is Top 10, which I love. This might be my favorite America's Best Comics series. I don't know. Tom Strong, maybe. No, Top 10. It's either Top 10 or Tom Strong or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. No, I'll say it's Tom Strong or Top 10. I have not been able to decide. One day when I finally make my list of like favorite, then I'll have to take the call between Tom Strong and Top 10. But Top 10 tells the story of a city, Neopolis, in which everyone has powers. That doesn't mean everyone's a hero. It just means that everyone has powers. Some people have very powerful powers. Some people have not so powerful powers. But everyone has moved there after the war. And this city which is 100% populated by powered creatures, needs police. And Top 10, the 10th precinct, is the Neopolis police station. And this is your Law and Order, Hill Street Blues, police procedural of who are the cops when everyone has superpowers. And it takes that idea and runs with it. It's not just making the simplest and the easiest jokes you can find, although there are plenty of those as well. It has such an interesting approach to the storytelling, again, where they're serious, but it's funny, but then they're really serious. And serious things happen in it, much more than Tom Strong. Top 10 has some storylines and some plot points and some subplots that are very dark, because it is, after all, an urban... You have the SVU part of the Law and Order here as well, but it's also incredibly moving. There are 2 or 3 stories that I can think of right now that are some of the most touching comic stories I've read. And to be able to do this within this premise in which everyone from Godzilla to Santa Claus to the Norse gods can make an appearance, because this is the kind of stuff that Alan Moore loves to do, the mixing of things and putting them, and the artwork in this book rises to it, where it shows you... I'm trying to find... Look, there's drunk Santa crashing, but there are panels where, like Jeff Darrow panels, you'll just stay for a while to see how many details you can spot, and how many of those details are in-jokes, and how many of them are references to other things. So you've got this really serious story about mortality, and you've got a garbage can in which Spider-Man's mask and glove is sticking out of it, right at the corner of the thing. So you've got the garbage can in which Spider-Man abandoned his costume as a jokey reference right next to a very somber and serious story. And it works. It works because you smile at that and you are thinking about this. This is a difficult thing to do well, I think. And this is another one of those reasons why I'm such a big fan of Alan Moore. And the work that he did over here is excellent. So I'm very happy to see him win again. And I'm very happy that he gives me 5 titles with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Prometheus, Tom Strong, Tomorrow's Stories, and Top 10. So that's 10 points out of a possible 10. Now that's a banner year, 2000. That's looking all right, I think. Yes. The deluxe editions of Tom Strong, I think, only had volumes 1 and 2. They never came out with the third one. To finish the series, you would need all 6. You would need all 6 of these books. So sorry. So these are the slim hardcovers. Of course, there are the trade paperbacks, which are the exact same thing. I like these though because they have ribbons and dust jackets and stuff like that. So there's 6 of those for the full Tom Strong story, and the deluxes, the larger, oversized deluxes, only had 1 and 2, which is ridiculous because I can see that really irritating people. But luckily, well, I don't know if it's luckily, but you can read volume 1 for sure, even volume 2, and not need volume 3. It's just so good that you would like to see how they ended the story. Although nothing ever ends these days, really. So I'm sure Tom Strong, I've heard, is back or something like that. All right. So thank you, Alan Moore. Thank you, year 2000, for that. 2001. All right, so here's where so he does it again, and now I can't count these anymore because of the rules. So this is going to be a 0 because it's exactly the same 5: League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Prometheus, Tom Strong, Tomorrow Stories, and top 10. So great. Let's just go and put a 0 here and a 0 there. Okay, 2002. What do you? Oh well, we weren't looking at the. Who are the other nominees? Just for Ed Brubaker, Scene of the Crime. Warren Ellis for The Authority, Planetary, the one I haven't read, Transmet. See there, if Warren Ellis had won, I would have done my first score in which I would have given myself a point for owning, but not a point for reading, which would have been the case with Planetary. Luckily, so far, I haven't had that happen yet, but there it would have been. The Authority, Planetary, and Transmetropolitan. All right. Mark Millar, Superman Adventures. Greg Rucka, Whiteout Melt. All right. So this is more Whiteout. So look over here. Greg Rucka is smart. He's got the subtitle, after the colon. So Whiteout won't count only once. Whiteout, if had one, you would have Whiteout Melt and Whiteout. What was the first one that we saw over here? Where was it? Because now did I just pass it? It was the first year. No, now I can't. I thought I'd seen him. Oh well, maybe I'm not wearing my glasses because I don't want to. Thank you, Tommy. That's very generous. Tommy Alatalo, ladies and gentlemen. We've got. Okay, I saw another one around here, didn't I? Oh, it's warm here. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Where were we? 2002. All right, 2002. Brian Michael Bendis for Powers, Alias, Daredevil, and Ultimate Spider-Man. So, Brian Michael Bendis. All right, so let's do the confessions. I have not read Alias. I don't own it. I know it's a big deal. Jessica Jones, I think the show was based heavily on Alias, or what he wrote in Alias. I've heard nothing but good things about it. So I don't know. I don't have an excuse for it, I suppose. I should look into Alias. And I haven't read Brian Michael Bendis' Daredevil. So I've heard good stuff about that as well. But yeah, I just never... I don't... Because I think by this time... Well, not by 2002, but when I was reading comics, I stopped reading as many superhero comics as I had been because I was reading some other stuff, starting with Vertigo, but also Fantagraphics, Drawn and Quarterly. These are all publishers that I was just introducing myself to and learning more about and learning about people. And then I started thinking about my budget and my bookshelf space, and you have to make choices. So I'm sure that there were a number of spectacular sort of thanks, Samuel. There were a number of superhero comics that I think I may have just ignored or not even known about because I wasn't looking at that. So I haven't read Alias. I haven't read Daredevil. So that's 4 possible points over there that I'm not going to get. But I am happy to say that I have read Powers, and I do like Powers. Powers. Where is my Powers? Do I? I believe I do have a copy of it. There we go. So this is how I have read Powers in these deluxe hardcovers that I bought of someone selling them on Facebook. And I'd heard so much good stuff about Powers that it seemed like a good opportunity. And then I was worried. I was like, man, I just committed to buying 5 hardcovers. for a series I have no idea whether I'm going to like. And I don't do that very often. Most of the time when I'm buying a deluxe hardcover, most of the time it used to be that I had the trade. And then that's a really expensive thing to do, to buy the trade and to buy the deluxe hardcover. So with things like Mr. Miracle, etc., I got to the point where I'm like, I think there will be a deluxe hardcover. Maybe I'll wait for it. There's plenty of stuff to read. So this is one of those weird times when I was like, am I going to seek out the trade paperbacks of Powers, and what order do I read them in? Because they all have these different subtitles. So this felt like a neat way of getting it, and I was relieved that I enjoyed it a lot. The story is similar. I mean, interesting that we were talking about Top 10, which has a police procedural. Powers is also police procedural, but it deals with superheroes like Top 10 and more like Astro City, sort of adjacently. So you're not talking about super-powered cops, but you also have this very, what I thought was a terrific art style for the story, because it makes you feel somewhat like it's a animated, the animated series look, the Bruce Timm, Darwin Cook, and Ty Templeton. There's a certain cartoony goodness to certain figure work, and that makes it look very appealing. And this art style definitely borrows from that, but it's not quite that, and it's not only that. And the story that this art tells with the script is a pretty dark one. It's violent. It's got all kinds of violence in it. Some of it fairly disturbing, even for you, but not exploitative and not gory in a particular way that I'm thinking. But it is dark, and it is about those kind of dark investigations. But the balance between the powered people and the super powered people, and who's in whose world and who's stepping out of bounds, it's a terrific piece of world building. Because I really, obviously, as you've seen from those other winners, also I have a soft spot for the cops in superhero stuff. Gotham Central is a series that I really enjoyed, and well, when they're done well, they have such an interesting way of commenting on superheroes and the stuff that we love. And I think Powers is a very good addition to that library of police and investigations in a world with superheroes. How much of you are redundant, and what powers do you really have? There are so many interesting questions that can come up, and I was very impressed. I think there are mini-series and things that continue after this original series that are collected in these 5 volumes, in these 5 deluxe editions. I've never read anything that follows up, but I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this series of these stories. So that will count. And what will also count is Ultimate Spider-Man, because I have read Ultimate Spider-Man and I love Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man was a big. I'm trying to find my first. So I think I'm missing one of these trades, or maybe 2 of these trades. If they go to 22, anyway, I have from 1 till 20, and then I have like one other. So I'm missing one of these trades. I have read the full story. It ends interestingly and well, but I really like the beginning and the middle of it. I had a great time reading Ultimate Spider-Man. This was also one of those comics that I read alongside stuff like Watchmen and Mouse, where there were 2 or 3 different kinds of comics that I was rediscovering, not having read them from childhood. And Ultimate Spider-Man was perfect because it was written in a way that someone in college, is where I was at that time, would appreciate and understand it, but it still contained all of these elements that made me a Spider-Man fan in my childhood. So as a starting point for a new reader, it's terrific. And for a starting point for someone coming back into Spider-Man, it's terrific. And it just worked for me at all levels. I enjoyed the new origin story. I enjoyed the updating stuff. I enjoyed him being made contemporary. It was just a fun series, and part of the fun for me was, having been such a big Spider-Man fan in my childhood, I found something that I could read as I said, as an adult, and feel the same joy, but also not feel as if I was being spoken down to or being pandered to, or if things were just too simplistic. I wasn't reading it and enjoying it out of nostalgia. I was reading it and enjoying it for what it was, but nostalgia was being used by it very well. So that's something I really appreciated in Ultimate Spider-Man. So Brian Michael Bendis, I think, is not for me as much of a body blow as Garth Ennis's year was. So I have not read Alias, I have not read Daredevil, but I have read and do own Bowers and Ultimate Spider-Man. So that gives me 4 out of a possible 8. All right. That is 2002 done. Let us move on to 2003. 2003, it's Brian Michael Bendis again. Powers, Alias, Daredevil, Ultimate Spider-Man. It's the same 4, 2 years in a row. Good job. But for us, it is a 0 and a 0, since these are the books that we just saw. All right, moving on to 2004. All right. Oh yeah, who else? Brian Azzarello for Hellblazer and 100 Bullets. Grant Morrison for Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4. What? I've not heard of that. New X-Men. Well, I've heard of that. Greg Rucka, Queen and Country, and Detective Comics. Mark Waid for Ruse. I have never read Ruse, but I've heard good stuff about it. I do like Mark Waid. And the next year, Ed Brubaker for Catwoman, Detective Comics. This is when it moved from the back of Detective Comics to its own series, and Gotham Central. That's a good year for Brubaker. Incredible Hulk by Bruce Jones. Haven't read it. Greg Rucka's Queen and Country, Gotham Central, which he's doing with Brubaker. And Wonder Woman, Bill Willingham for Fables, 2003. Nominated but not won. Oh, look, I see a familiar name over here. 2004, the winner is Alan Moore, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Prometheus, Max, Tom Strong, and Tom Strong's Terrific Tales. All right, so League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Prometheus, and Tom Strong have already been counted. So we've got 2 new books here, Smacks and Tom Strong's Terrific Tales. And I think you can guess that they are books I have enjoyed reading and do have. Here we have Tom Strong's Terrific Tales. Oh, hold on. Here's Tom Strong's Terrific Tales. This is an anthology series using the characters in the world of Tom Strong, but separate from the main series and not really connected to it in a major way. There are some small ways, but they're not really. You can read this separately, but I think this makes the most sense and is the most fun if you've already read or are already reading Tom Strong side by side. And I like that idea of the experience of maybe the way it was in those days of what came out that week or what came out that month. You had that issue of Tom Strong and that issue of Tom Strong's Terrific Tales, and you pick them both up, read them both together. So this has different artists. It's not Chris Sprouse on the main art duties, so a lot of guest artists for the different stories, and they're all a lot of fun. Just like Tom Strong, I think Tom Strong's Terrific Tales have a lovely mixture of earnestness and goofiness mixed in with science fiction and horror and adventure. It's a lot of fun, and I like this anthology format that it follows as well, because each issue of Tom Strong's Terrific Tales is actually divided into 3. So you get one issue about Tom Strong. You get one story. In each issue, you get one story about Tom Strong himself. You get one story about young Tom Strong, which is a story from his childhood, and one story about a descendant of Tom Strong. So you've got the past, the present of the story, and the future, and each issue is 3 stories. And I thought that was also a very fun way to do things. And like with comics that do things like this, I'm obviously going to think of Usagi Yojimbo, but I've seen this in a couple of different formats. Donjon, which was a French comic that we were talking about recently, has 3 entire series running in 3 timelines. So you've got the current day, you've got the origin stories, and then you've got the side stuff, and you've got the distant future. And all 3 and the books published, like you can have one that is taking place in the past and one that's taking place published a couple of months or in the same year. It makes for a very interesting way to read. And I think if you picked up a copy, if you picked up a volume of Tom Strong and then read, say, the first 2 trade paperbacks, then started reading Tom Strong's Terrific Tales, you'd have a completely different experience than reading it separately and at another time. So a great series. I don't think it lasted very long, but they're all a lot of fun. And the other book is Smacks, which is a spin-off sequel from Top 10. So you take 2 characters from Top 10, Smacks as well as Toy Box, and they go off to Smacks's homeland. So they leave Neopolis. He takes a little leave because he has a family issue, and his partner and him go home. He visits home. So it's a spin-off road trip thing, return home story that is also a fantasy, because he comes from because it's Top 10, it's all these different dimensions and all these different worlds. He comes from a world of D&D archetypes. So Smacks's world is full of goblins and elves and barbarians, and there is a dragon that is tormenting the village, and he gets roped into, and he doesn't want anything to do with this. He didn't even want to come back home, but he has had to because of this. And it takes this thing of someone coming back home and bringing a friend with them who's an outsider and has all these questions, and the person who's from there is very taciturn and doesn't want to do anything and doesn't want to answer any questions. But then in this fantasy world, they have to undertake this mission. There are weird parts to Smacks. There's sort of an incest subplot that is, it's Alan Moore. So it's a little strange, but for the most, it's a fun little romp. I think Smacks is quite... it shows you how much range Alan Moore has, where he can write all of these different stories that are so strange and so weird and so different from each other, and write them all at the same time and actually have them connect. The fact that these guys come from the world of Top 10, but suddenly you're in this magic land, it kind of makes sense, because Top 10 set you up to expect these different dimensions and all that stuff. But you thought of him as a science fiction hero, Smacks, and he's actually a medieval fantasy hero, is, I think, a good joke, and I think it's very well pulled off. So Smacks and Tom Strong's Terrific Tales, both recommended. I think depending on your taste, Smacks a little bit more adult, and Tom Strong's Terrific Tale a little bit more all ages. Although, how often is Alan Moore really all ages? So anyway, that means that, well, we are not going to count that. We're not going to count Prometheus, and we're not going to count Tom Strong. So there's 4 possible over there, and I get 4 because I have read Tom Strong's Terrific Tales as well as Smacks. Thank you, Alan Moore, once again. Also in this year were Brian Azzarello, Sergeant Rock, Batman, Brian Michael Bendis, Alias, Daredevil, Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Powers, Ed Brubaker, Catwoman, Detective Comics, Gotham Central, Sleeper, Warren Ellis. Wow, lots and lots of If Warren Ellis had won and someone had read that, was a lot of points. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh, look, 6. No, wait, that's just the 5th one. Never mind. Greg Rucka. All right, moving on to, look at that, 2005. Brian K. Vaughan wins Best Writer for Y the Last Man, Ex Machina, and Runaways. And I like Y the Last Man. Well, no. I'll say I love it. I've been trying to figure out if I really love it or not, and I think that's because a lot of very smart people have been telling me that it's not that good or something like that. And I was like, well, they're very smart. They must be right. So I was trying to be, I don't know. When I read this, I galloped through it. It was one of the fastest, most compelling, compulsive reads. It had something about its pacing, the way the cliffhangers worked, the way the plot turned, and the fact that the art was so clean and unobtrusive that it just didn't get in the way at all. It just kept things moving. A lot of the art, I think, is underestimated because it looks so simple and because it looks, maybe the backgrounds aren't as complex as people would have liked them to be, and you've got a lot of long panels with faces, etc. And I thought it worked beautifully because I read through it fast, but it's not just the speed of it providing, of you mainlining this story. It's not just that. It's the fact that I remember the tone of the voice that the characters used, and that's really good comic storytelling. So your writing and your art has worked well together to create a sound in my ear. And the dialogue in this book, the dialogue between the characters, when they're being sarcastic, when they're being, I think there is a little bit of the quippiness. I think Brian K. Vaughan has that, and that Joss Whedon has that, and that's what makes Brian K. Vaughan a good person to write Buffy comics and things like that. There is that, and I think if you are really, really absolutely, I cannot have any quips, I cannot have anyone make any smart remarks, it won't be for you, or you won't like it that much. But honestly speaking, I thought there was a terrific take on a post-apocalyptic story. It had a very interesting concept that everything with a Y chromosome is dead. All males are gone except for this one man and his monkey, and they're both male, and they're the only two males left on the planet. But what it does with that, and how it creates the world without men, and why the logic, it doesn't have to be anything mind-blowing. It just has to hang together in a way that makes sense, and I thought that for the most it did. The ending of Why the Last Man is a little polarizing. I thought for the longest time that I absolutely loved the comic except for the end, and I hate the end. And now I don't necessarily hate the end. I just think that Brian K. Vaughan does a good job of making you care about his characters, and sometimes you feel that he treats them badly because he's made you care about them. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but I think it works in this story. I think I've gotten to the point where I feel my disappointment with the ending wasn't really a disappointment at an ending. It was me feeling the things that he wanted me to feel as a writer. So from that point of view, I think it's very well written, because if you can do that, if that's what you wanted to do and you achieve that effect, no matter how people feel about being manipulated like that, you can still give credit for someone to be able to pull off that manipulation, especially over the 50 or so issues that this series ran for. So I'm a fan of Why the Last Man. I've read it and I own it, so 2 points over there for me. Ex Machina is my favorite Brian K. Vaughan, so I absolutely own it. I've got it in a couple of different formats because I wanted to get these hardcovers, but I couldn't get them when I first started reading the book in trades, and I bought them used. I bought one trade used. I enjoyed it, and then I bought all the trades, and then I wanted hardcovers because I could tell that these thin trades were going to get a lot of reading on them. And I looked for these hardcovers. I found them. I love them. I love reading them in the hardcovers. I have no interest in an absolute edition. I have no interest in, an omnibus edition or anything like that. I think these are just perfect for this story, which I've said on a number of occasions is my favorite Brian K. Vaughan comic. And it's not, again, to everyone's tastes. I mean, what is to everyone's tastes, really? But to me, the mixture of a superhero past with a political present and the kind of ethical questions that this book tries to deal with in politics as well as in superheroics, in government, in people, and makes it an exciting, pulse-pounding, twisted story with betrayals and double crosses is terrifically done. I find it very compelling. I find it very enjoyable. I really recommend it to people, even if people aren't usually Brian K. Vaughan fan. If they aren't, well, I don't know. If you're not a Brian K. Vaughan fan at all, and if you've never enjoyed anything he's ever done, maybe not. But I do think that give this a shot. It's different from Why the Last Man. It's different from Saga and Paper Girls and things like that. But it's pop, it's not dense. It's not going to lose you. You're going to be hooked. You're going to be able to follow along, and it's just a very interesting story, very well told. So Ex Machina, definitely something I've read and own, as I do Brian K. Vaughan stuff on Runaways. This is probably my least favorite, I guess, of these three. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's not a bunch of kids discover that their superpowered parents are actually supervillains, and these kids have superpowers as well. So they are the Runaways, and it's adventure, road trip, powers. It's a lot of stuff that I've seen before. It's just that nothing stood out to me in Runaways as being absolutely brilliant, absolutely new, but I also didn't get into the characters. Now, I've tried rereading this one more. The first time I read it, I read the whole thing. Didn't care for it as much as I thought I would, because I was in the throes of having read other Brian K. Vaughan. And as you'll see, the artwork, the colors, it's all very... There's nothing junky or disposable about it at all, and it's quite a lot of fun at parts, but at other parts it was a bit of a slog. And there were times when I was like, all right, I've gotten this thing, now you've got to get to something else, and you're taking a long time to get there. And other times it was like, what, you're already there? What about all this other stuff I have to do? So it jumped at the wrong times, and it slowed down at the wrong times for me. So I know a lot of people love The Runaways, and obviously it's a Eisner winning work for him in this year. I'm happy that I've read it, and I'm happy that I own it, because that allows me to put some points up over here. So this is 2000. Wait, what? Right, we counted 2005. Brian K. Vaughan. That's 6 out of 6. 3 books read, 3 books owned. All right, how are we doing? All right, 2005, 2006, Alan Moore. See, this is what I meant early on when I said he's the Meryl Streep and Katharine Hepburn of the Eisners. Nothing like Todd Klein. If you're interested in this, you should take a look at the Eisners for best lettering. If that's just an incredible list. It's just Todd Klein. But Alan Moore is back in 2006, winning for Prometheus. We've already counted this because of the rules we're following. And top 10, 49ers, which is a prequel to top 10. So this is about the foundation of that city of Neopolis that we were talking about, that the 10th precinct is in. So the hero of this story is this young boy. He's a war vet because he flew and fought in the war in spite of his age, and he has just recently moved into this city that is just being created now. It's just being made to house all of the science heroes after the war has ended. And so this is about the setting up of that city, and that young boy ends up becoming the grizzled police commissioner that we see in Top 10. So it's his origin story. Well, not his origin story, but his story as far as coming to this to the city is concerned, and a couple of the things as far as the relationship. And there's something over here that was referred to in Top 10 in just one scene, and that's sort of the backbone in many ways of the story you see over here. And it's good. This is well written. It's well drawn. It's not as good as Top 10. It's a lot more somber. It's a lot more serious. And this is an interesting thing about, just like with Smacks. So Smacks and 49ers are both spin-offs and movement continuations of the Top 10 thing by Alan Moore himself. And they couldn't be more different. One is like a painted meditation period piece. The other is a zany Dungeons and Dragons spoof coming out of a series about a police precinct in a city full of superpowered people. The range, I think, of what he does, again, with the same story, with the same characters, or with the same world, and what he can establish with that, I think, is what's most impressive. 49ers isn't my absolute favorite Alan Moore. It's not my favorite America's Best Comics, but it's a wonderful example of his world building, Alan Moore's world building skills, as well as Gene Ha's art, which I really think I should show a little bit more of. Just very different from Top 10, very different from Smacks. And I think I think it works really well with all of them. If you never read the 49ers, you're not going to miss anything, I don't think. But it is a nice little story in there. Yeah, there might be parts of it that will bother some people. That I think sometimes is a thing that you have to say for a lot of stories that Alan Moore writes. So it's not necessarily one of his all ages reads or PG-13 reads, but it's not gratuitous or explicit by any means. So it's just more about the subject matter and what's being talked about more than what's being shown to you. But it's a very interesting book. All right. So that was Top 10, the 49ers, allowing me to get 2 points out of a possible 2, being the new book that's added on top of Prometheus for 2006. How are we doing? All right. Any questions? Nothing there? All right. Have people fallen asleep? Maybe they have. I'm moving along. We are on to 2007. Ooh, Ed Brubaker for Captain America, Daredevil, and Criminal. So here's the thing. I have not read Ed Brubaker's Captain America, so that's a 0 out of 2 over there. I have not read Ed Brubaker's Daredevil. And this is I feel bad about that, because I've heard Ed Brubaker's Daredevil is very good. But just like Brian Michael Bendis' Daredevil, I have not read Ed Brubaker's Daredevil. So I have read Criminal. Now, here's a question for you guys, right? So we're doing this thing where if you've read something, then we're counting it as all, and we're not counting. And this is my question about Criminal, because I have read the 3rd trade paperback of Criminal, which is The Dead and the Dying. And I've read the 2nd deluxe edition of Criminal, which has 3 more books in it. So that's 4 out of 6 as far as the 2 deluxes are concerned. The 3rd deluxe that just came out recently, I haven't gotten that yet. I've read some other stuff that's related to the Criminal universe, like Bad Weekend and Cruel Summer. So do I count Criminal? Because I have not read the first 2, but I've read 4 or 5 others. So this might be this might be where I get a 0. No, come on. I should be able to count Criminal, I think. I know, because it's 2007, etc. But we're not looking at which year, which stories were published. So this is why I have this column that says maybe. So I will say that I'll say maybe I'll put 2 points for having read Criminal and for owning Criminal. But you can let me know if that maybe should not be up there and I should get a 0 over here because I haven't read all of Criminal. But given how many points I've given up across my Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and all of that stuff, I think I should be allowed to have these 2 points. Because if we're going by that, then I should get one for every Sandman, etc., etc. Moving on from 2007 to is Ed Brubaker again. All right. So Captain America, still not read it. Criminal, we already counted it. Okay, so Captain America, Criminal, and Daredevil will not count as possibles because they were already there before. The Immortal Iron Fist is a new thing, and I haven't read Ed Brubaker's. Ed Brubaker, I guess I should read more of his stuff because he won twice in a row for some, for a wide variety of things. So I'm going to say that over here is my first 0 out of a possible 2 because you could have scored 2 for Immortal Iron Fist. All right, so from 1988 to 2008 is 20 years, not counting 1990, which didn't have an award. So, all right, so that's my first 0 in 2008. Oh well, moving along. Oh, look, James Sturm was there over here for Satchel Paige. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Astonishing X-Men for Joss Whedon. Brian Wood's DMZ. Any of these guys would have kept me from getting a 0. Thanks, Ed. All right, Bill Willingham, 2009, Fables and House of Mystery. I am a fan of Fables. I have read it. I do own it. So that's 2 points over there. Fables I talked about I talked about it in my top 10 fantasy, my final video. I think I ended up making 3 top 10 fantasy videos. So your honorable mentions, your more honorable mentions, and then the final actual list. So Fables is mentioned over there. I talk about it. I talk about why. It's a great series. Some people say the first half of the series is better than the second half. I'll agree with that. I think it's a really good first half, but it's also not the best of starts. The first volume, Legends in Exile, the murder mystery thing, is okay as an introduction to the characters, but from Animal Farm, the second volume onwards, is where it takes off. And so once you go through those arcs, once you get past the first 6 issues, which are necessary, I would tell people to skip the first 6 or 7 or whatever it was issues and just start from Animal Farm, but that's a little too much in the deep end. I think it does a good job of setting up who these people are, what their relationships with each other are, and things that pay off later also, but it's just not the most compelling compared to what comes later. But once Fables takes off, I think it does a stupendous job. I really enjoyed its popular myth and fairy tale merging storytelling. It's stuff that we see a lot of people do. Alan Moore does it, Neil Gaiman does it, Grant Morrison I think kind of does it in his own head Fables. But this I think did a fantastic job of making things enjoyable and lovable and not just brainy or like, oh, how smart am I that I know that reference or I know that. It was honestly compelling as far as these characters and their situations are concerned. The artwork in it is something that I've always enjoyed. It might not be to everyone's taste. Again, as I always say, what is to everyone's taste? But this is good. It reminds me of children's books illustrations. Not at the level of Charles Vess, although there are some. I think there's a Fable story illustrated by Charles Vess, but reminiscent or in that style, but also making it more comicsy, making it more less like an illustrated prose, and I really enjoyed that combination. I do agree with people who say that maybe the second half is not as good as the first half of the whole series. And yes, I can agree with that, but I think some of that also has to do with our own expectations. I know that the more you become familiar with the world and the way things work, the more, your expectations for what the next kick is going to be goes up. So it's kind of I had this when I was reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the funniest book. And then as you read the other books, I didn't laugh out loud as much as I did. But arguably, the later books may be better written. They may be better structured. They may be more clever. But you've gotten used to the humor. You've gotten used to the pitch at which it is. And I think that's what happens with Fables, is that for that first arc and for the completion of that great big first arc, it throws everything at you as what it has as at its disposal. And so you're at that level. And what comes afterwards is variations on that. And you've seen that. So maybe you can just read the first 12 trade paperbacks of Fables, or the first 11, and just call it quits and say, all right, that was the entire series. And you could end over there if you wanted to. But I'm fine with the whole series. I like the entire series. And so I have read Fables. I own Fables. I have not read House of Mystery by Bill Willingham, and I do not own it. I don't actually know if I've even heard of it. Is it a good series? Is it something that people have enjoyed? Let me know if you have. But I'm taking a 0 on that, giving myself 2 for having read and owned Fables out of a possible 4 if I had only read Joe Hill for Lock and Key, Michael Straczynski for Thor and the 12. I don't know what the 12 is. Mariko Tamaki for Skim, Matt Wagner for Zorro, and Madame Xanadu. Interesting. Bill Willingham for Fables and House of Mystery. Moving on to the 2010s. Ed Brubaker, my old friend. Captain America. Nope. Daredevil. No. The Marvels Project. I don't know what the Marvels Project is. And I have not read Incognito, and I don't own Incognito. So Ed Brubaker is my nemesis in this game. So Captain America doesn't count because it's been counted before. Daredevil doesn't count. The Marvels Project is new, so that's 0 out of 2 for me. Criminal doesn't count. Incognito does count, so that's 0 out of 4 for me, for Ed Brubaker, 2010. Thank you very much. 0 out of a possible 4. All right, let's hope things get better. 2011, Joe Hill for Lock and Key. Yes, things did get better. I have read Lock and Key. I do own Lock and Key. I enjoy Lock and Key a lot. I have it in these hardcover master editions, which I read the first trade that I borrowed from a friend, and the first trade is it's terrific. It's a real knockout. It immediately said, I want to buy this and I want to get this, and then I had to do a little bit of research to find out what the best form to get it in is, because I was like, this looks like it's going to be a good series, so let me try. And then I was looking for a deluxe hardcover. There was a slipcase box set or something like that. And then I found these, and they were very reasonably priced, and I have not regretted it. It's a great series that I think maybe loses a little bit of steam right at the end. The beginning of the series, unlike some others that I've talked about, that maybe the beginning is, like Fables, the beginning of the series is superb. It hits the ground running, and it just gets better and better and better. So it starts and you think you're in this kind of creepy, haunted, Amityville horror type of Stephen King or Lovecraft really is what they're talking about, because of this haunted history of this area, of what has happened over there. And then you have this family moving into this into this house, and the artwork is absolutely gorgeous, by Gabriel Rodriguez, whose Little Nemo book with Eric Schanauer I was talking about and also got into because of this. And it's a great family dynamic, haunted house, mystery, spooky stuff that escalates to levels that you're just not expecting, of what this house is about and what the keys that you find in this, the lock and key of the title. Great series, a very fun read, very entertaining, galloping pace is absolutely, you can believe that people would gallop through this and read this very fast, but you should slow down, look at the art, and read it again. I had a great time with Lock and Key. I do wish that the ending had just anyway, it's okay. It's nitpicking, but Joe Hill for Lock and Key in the year 2000, what was it? Where were we? 2008? 2011. Okay, thank goodness. I mean, this is a long live stream. Sorry. So Lock and Key, yes. So 2 points for Lock and Key. Having read Lock and Key, 2 points for owning Lock and Key. Thank you very much. 2011. Ian Boothby. Oh, he was writing Simpsons, Futurama comics. Interesting. John Layman for Chew, Jim McCann for Return of the Dapper Men. Nick Spencer for Morning Glory, Shut It On for Existence. Huh. Oh well. 2011. 2012. Winner Mark Waid for Irredeemable, Incorruptible, and Daredevil. Now, I have an admission to make. And you might have guessed it. I have not read Irredeemable. I have not read Incorruptible. And it's weird because I am a fan of Mark Waid. But he's just written so much stuff. There is so much. But I know that he's very proud of these two books. So I just have to get my hands on them. This is probably along with the Daredevils that I haven't read, more than Incognito and a couple of the other Brubakers. I think this is standing out to me as the big hole in my reading. I think they're related to each other. I mean, they must be because their titles are like that, and I don't know much about them because I've always thought that I will want to read them. I know it's something like a bad Superman or something like that, which is maybe something I get from the title. But those are two books that I need to read, and I haven't read them, so that's 0 points. And I know that that doesn't bode well for me, but I want to show you one thing, though. It's funny. I do have Mark Waid's Daredevil, and I have all three of the deluxe editions that make up his run. So Brian Michael Bendis Daredevil? No. Ed Brubaker Daredevil? No. Anything else that has happened before this? No. Why do I have Mark Waid's Daredevil when I don't have those? For the same reason that I had Powers. Someone was selling them used online, and I am, as I said, a fan of Mark Waid. It was an opportunity to grab them. And I've since found that this particular run of Daredevil is not necessarily beloved by most people because they prefer the darker, grittier Daredevil that came before Mark Waid's run. And apparently this is too optimistic and too hopeful and too positive to be Daredevil or something like that, where people just prefer the stuff that came before it and the stuff that hits harder and is grittier. The one thing that I keep hearing is less optimistic or not so optimistic, or this cheery run, or not even cheery but optimistic, and I have no problem with optimism, and I enjoyed this. I don't have anything to compare it to, as has been made evident. I have not read the runs of Daredevil leading up to this. So I have read other Daredevil, in my childhood. I've read some snatches of it every now and then. I've read the Loeb and Sale Yellow, but I've not read a lot of Daredevil. Mark Waid's 3 volumes of Daredevil is actually quite a lot of superhero reading for me because of my fandom of Mark Waid. Not fandom enough to have read Irredeemable and Incorruptible, obviously. So I'm just a pseudo fan. That's shameful. But at least this odd sudden appearance of Daredevil, where it had never existed for any of the nominations before, at least it prevents me from having a 0 over here. So for that, at least, I'm glad. But I will have to get those other books. So I get myself 2 out of a possible 6, because there were 3 books over there. Reading and owning all of them would be 6 total. I'm able to make 2 out of that 6. It's better than 0, but not as good as it could have been. All right, let's move on. 2013, Brian K. Vaughan Saga. Yes. Saga. I have read it. I enjoy it a lot. I know, again, a lot of people enjoy Saga. A lot of people love, worship Saga. And an equal number of people, I think, these days, I hear at least, there was a time when I wasn't connected at all, but these days, I happen to be involved in comics conversations. But nowadays, I find a lot of people saying they don't like Saga and it leaves them cold and they hate it and etc. etc. And fair enough, I mean, as I say, there's nothing that appeals to everyone. But I really enjoy Saga. I think it's fun. I think it's touching. I think it's good adventure. I understand the problems that some people have with it. And I think there are certain criticisms, particularly of the anachronistic nature of its language, or of how people talk to each other. It seems like it'll date itself very quickly, and you don't want to see pop cultural references, maybe not pop cultural from the point of view of a movie or a TV show, but fidget spinners, the last one that really pissed me off as well. But you don't want to see those kind of references in a space opera, because, that's somehow timeless. So that's different dimension, different galaxy, something. How can it possibly be this thing that we have on Earth? And I completely understand that. But I also like people who play with those expectations. I like the use of anachronism when done craftfully. And I will say that I don't think that it's all done craftfully, all of the anachronisms. But I think there's so much more in Saga outside of that usually things that I don't like very heavy-handed narration, especially by a child talking about her childhood, etc. But then, you have To Kill a Mockingbird. So you can't be too stringent about just not, you got to see about how each thing executes the thing it does. It's just like, I'm against narration, I'm against voiceover, I'm against dubbing. I understand the criticism, but Saga is so much fun. It's not about the sex and it's not about the violence. It's about the family stuff and the jokey stuff and the danger therein and taking the time to have love and friends and stuff like that. I think it's really trying to it's trying to do both things. It wants to be as scandalous as it can be in a comic book, because it can be, because you don't have to think about it as a television show. There are limits to what you can show and do, or you don't have to think about it as a movie. So it's obviously reveling in that very gleefully, but it's also very interested. I think the way Brian K. Vaughan has always been in units of family, of people on the road, and who come together, and a lot of his family stuff, I think, has been where it's not necessarily family, or it's adopted family, or it's a mixture of actual biological family and adopted family, including a Pride of Lions. I think over here it's very directly like mother, father, child, but again, it's all these other things in family. So those are the things that I've enjoyed about Saga, and now I also enjoy the fact that it gives me 2 points for this year. So 2013 is 2 points for owning and for having read Saga. All right. Ed Brubaker for Fatal, Matt Fraction for Hawkeye and Casanova, Brandon Graham for Prophet and Multiple Warheads. Oh, interesting. Jonathan Hickman for the Manhattan Projects, and Frank M. Young for the Carter Family. That is not someone or a comic I have heard of. Interesting. Up for Best Writer against some big shots. 2014, Brian K. Vaughan, Saga. All right. That's a 0 out of a possible 0. So, is he going to... No, he doesn't. 2015 is Gene Luen Yang for Avatar The Last Airbender and The Shadow Hero from first second. Now, I'm a big Gene Luen Yang fan, and I've been planning a Gene Luen Yang video for a long time as a retrospective of his works, but I keep like, oh, there's one book I don't have, there's another book I don't have. I do talk about American Born Chinese in my top 10 gateway comics, which I think is just a terrific comic that everyone should read, but I talk about why it's such a great comic in that one. And Boxers and Saints is an interesting read. It's not as, to me, powerful as love inducing as American Born Chinese, but it's still pretty good. But Avatar: The Last Airbender is a terrific series that he has adapted and worked on with the creators of the TV show. And I'm a fan of the TV show. I was a little concerned about the comics, where I was just like, well, if I don't hear their voices in my head, and if they don't have that chemistry, will it be the same thing? Which is usually the way I approach any comics version of something in a TV or a movie that I've liked. But I gave it a shot, and it's really good. In particular, this first story, The Promise, about the Avatar, Aang, and his best friend, who's supposed to be his best friend, the king of the Fire Nation. At the end of the TV show, they've got a particular relationship, and this picks up almost immediately after that and tests that relationship through a story about war, colonization, and where do people belong, and if people have been born in the colonies, do they belong? It's these kind of heady questions mixed in with this very fun, goofy group of people that makes this show and this comic very, very compelling. And Gene Luen Yang is a perfect fit for this, where he's always got that, where he's got that heart and that deep ethos examining sort of storytelling happening with very funny, very goofy kid stuff right next to it. The drawings in this by Gurihiru are terrific. Later, they would collaborate on Superman Smashes the Klan, which I made a video on. But they've done 5 Avatar books together, and all of them are highly recommended by my wife, Ashwita, who's a big fan of the comic series. She's a big fan of the TV show like me, but she read these comics long before I did, and loves them. And now Faith Erin Hicks has taken up the series from Gene Luen Yang. So any of his books are completely worth picking up. And if you're a fan of the TV show, it's a no-brainer. You will feel like you are watching a movie version of the TV show. It's just nice and epic, but it's absolutely true to it. Very well written, not just for fans of the TV show. Very interesting, complex stories, good themes, good arguments, good debates, where you're not thinking about things as a good guy and a bad guy only, but everyone's got a point. Those are the kind of things that really work for me in stories like that, and Gene Luen Yang does a terrific job with that in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that is one, and the other book that he has won for is The Shadow Hero, which is where is it? I do have it. The Shadow Hero is a book done by Gene Luen Yang with Sunny Liu, who's the art of Charlie Chan Hok Chai, I think is a fantastic comic. It's very impressive. And when I read the art of Charlie Chan Hok Chai, I wanted to find other stuff that he had done. And when I heard about The Shadow Hero, and this was some many years ago, so this is before, or maybe this is, if only I could find that copy, huh? All right, I know what it is. I was looking for it at the last minute, and now I've gone and put it somewhere. But The Shadow Hero tells the story of probably the first Asian American superhero, the first Asian superhero published in the United States, because I'm trying to remember now if it was in the 1950s or the 1940s, The Green Turtle was a comic that was briefly published, and the Green Turtle was meant by its creator to be a Chinese origin. I mean, he was Chinese, but the publishers didn't want the publishers didn't want to do that, and they didn't think that it would be accepted by the public, and they wouldn't want a Chinese superhero. So all through the run in the 1940s, the Green Turtle was always masked, even though behind the mask he was an Asian, and he was helping the Americans against the Japanese during the war, right? So it must be the 40s. So that is something that Jean Luen Yang and Sonny Liu revived, and did this one 4 issues or 5 issues series, and that's all there is to it, in which they just gave him an origin and they had him unmasked, and it's a wonderful story. Now I am really irritated because I made sure that I would. No, I'm not irritated anymore. All right, here we go. Here is The Shadow Hero by Jean Luen Yang and Sonny Liu. And if you've not read Sonny Liu's The Art of Charlie Chan Hok Chai, I highly recommend that book. It's terrific. I love his art style. And in that book, he does the same kind of thing that we were talking about, Chris Sprouse, and where he draws different eras of comics in different styles, and he draws different genres of comics in different styles in a pseudo-historical representation. And his artwork over here is just fantastic. And this is a much more interesting book than you might think, and it's very well written. It's superbly drawn. I recommend it highly, and not just as a piece of history or as a piece of revival of a forgotten piece of superhero comics history, but just as a standalone read, and to see 2 creators just working in terrific form. Yeah, I could show you any page sequence, but it's really about the way that golden age storytelling has been used by these 2 modern creators. It doesn't always work, and it's interesting, we were talking about Miracle Man and Alan Moore, and in a previous video I talked about Trina Robbins's Wonder Woman, which was such a good golden age pastiche, but it didn't work for me because there wasn't more. This is something that I feel is contemporary and classic in a way that I really appreciated. So The Shadow Hero by Jean Luen Yang, highly recommended. Also, that means that I'm able to rack up 2 points each for reading and owning. So that's 4 out of 4 possible in 2015. Thank you very much, Jean Luen Yang, for Avatar and The Shadow Hero. Up against Jason Aaron, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Grant Morrison, Brian K. Vaughan, and G. Willow Wilson. 2016, Jason Aaron, Southern Bastards, Men of Wrath, Doctor Strange, Star Wars, and Thor. Who would like to take a guess in the chat how many of these I have read? Okay, so Southern Bastards is the only book that I've read over here. And I do own the first trade of Southern Bastards, but not the second one. And I couldn't find the first trade when looking. That's the one book I thought I had lost The Shadow Hero, but no. But I couldn't find my copy of the Southern Bastards. I read it because it was very well received and a lot of people encouraged me to. And I watched a very good YouTube video breaking down. I think it might have been Strip Panel Naked's video on Southern Bastards. And that was such a good video that I bought it. It was interesting, but it didn't quite catch my attention, so I didn't buy the second trade paperback. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Should I give myself points for that? I have it. I've read it, but it's only half. What is that? So, since I own it and have read it, but it's only half, instead of taking 2 points, what if I take 1 point for Southern Bastards? Because I've not got anything else with Men of Wrath, Doctor Strange, Star Wars, Thor. I've not read any yet, so it'll be a 0. So, out of pity, Thanks, Jason Aaron, who is the new Ed Brubaker in my book. I will give myself a 1 for having read half and owning half of Southern Bastards. But you know what the kicker is? The kicker is the other stuff. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5, that's 10 possible. So I'm scoring 1 out of a possible 10. Oh, that's 2016. That's a bad year for me in this game. Because of Jason Aaron. Now, John Allison, Giant Days, that could have worked. Ed Brubaker, Criminal Special Edition, Monstrous, Miss Marvel. All right, 2017, Brian K. Vaughan for Paper Girls, Saga, and We Stand on Guard. So, Saga we've already counted. We know that it doesn't. Paper Girls, yes. I have read Paper Girls. I own Paper Girls. It's a fun series. I know, once again, that there are mixed reactions to it. I thought it was pretty good. And I like Brian K. Vaughan taking things out there and making things weird and crazy. I thought that part of it worked all right for me. There were moments in it where the characters themselves, I wasn't 100% convinced by why they're doing this at this particular moment, but that passed pretty quickly. I think the action, I think the plotting, and especially the artwork in this book is very good. The artwork is superb, and it works. You know, as I was saying, the expressions, the tones of voices, those are the ways that I judge things. And there are twists and turns that feel very nifty and clever, although not all of them come to fruition in the most satisfactory way, but it is still a fun romp. I had a good time reading it. I think most people who will read it, if they just give themselves over to the, you know, what the story wants to be about, if they just get over that resistance, I think most people will have a good time. It's not a perfect series by any means. It's not the greatest Brian K. Vaughan writing that I've read, but it's compelling, and I enjoyed it more than Runaways. So, you know, there's that. And I think there's a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of things that Brian K. Vaughan has established in Runaways that I think he polishes up and does in Paper Girls interestingly and satisfactorily to me. So Paper Girls is something that I have read. Saga we're not counting, and We Stand on Guard. We Stand on Guard is not something I've read. I read the first issue. I was traveling actually at that time, and when it came out, and the first issue was in a comic book store that I walked into, so I picked it up because it was Brian K. Vaughan. So it's about the Canadian-US border, I think. But it didn't grip me, and anyway, I couldn't read subsequent issues, and by the time it came out in a trade or something, I'd sort of forgotten about it. So I'm not going to count that one issue of We Stand on Guard that I've read. So for this year, 2017, there's Paper Girls and We Stand on Guard, so that's 4 points possible, out of which I'm getting 2 because Saga doesn't count since it's already been done. Okay, moving along, 2018. Oh, I want to look at the nominations, but I know that I've been going on for a while. 2018 is a tie, the first tie in the Best Writer thing that we've seen. It's a tie between Marjorie Lau and Tom King. Tom King winning for Batman Annual number 2, Batman Elmer Fudd Special, and Mr. Miracle. Now, I have not read any Tom King Batman. That is possibly the hugest gap as far as, viewers or comic readers. It's like, I've not read a single issue of Tom King's Batman. I've heard plenty of stuff about it. It's just Batman Annual, therefore, falls into that thing. I have not read the Batman Annual. I have read Batman Elmer Fudd Special because it was part of that book that I talked about in one of my videos. That work, which is the DC Looney Tunes collection, collecting all of those ones. So Batman Elmer Fudd is sort of headlining this concert. It's the big story over here, and this is a good collection. I talk about it a little in my superhero comic spotlight, the one superhero comic spotlight video that I have, and and I enjoyed, I think, the Elmer Fudd story the most of all of these. It's a great story. It works well for me. I think Tom King is really good at short stories, and I haven't read his longer stuff. Well, I've read like stuff like Sheriff of Babylon, which I enjoyed. I've read now Vision, Mr. Miracle, etc. I've not read his Batman or any of the long series that he does, but I really like this short story. So that anthology allows me to be able to count Batman Elmer Fudd special. And Mr. Miracle, similarly, is something that I have read, and it is something that I have made a video about. So As Good As They Say, I think, was the name of my video, in which I looked at both Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerards, as well as Kyle Baker's Plastic Man, both of which came out in deluxe editions. And this was a claustrophobic book in many ways, but it was also surprisingly funny for being as dark and full of the dark material that Tom King is interested in. There's suicide and self-harm and weighty themes about parenthood and domesticity, but there's also a humor that I wasn't expecting, and I think that little thing of humor helped put this over the edge to something that I think is really good. I still believe that Vision, Tom King's Vision, is a story that I was more immediately attracted to. As soon as I was reading it, and when I got to the end, I was like, oh, this is really good. Mr. Miracle was a lot more cerebral, in which I had to focus and concentrate and understand, but I also think that means that this has a good reread value. So I was impressed by it when I read it. You'll find more opinions on it, probably more positive, coming out of that immediate read, gushing views on it in that video. But I have read Mr. Miracle. I do own Mr. Miracle. So along with Batman Elmer Fudd, that helps me get some points over there. The other part of the tie is, of course, Marjorie Lau's Monstrous, which I have also read, but not read all of. So this is one of those things in which I've definitely read the arc of Monstrous that she's winning for here, which I would believe is the first one, but I don't know how we're doing it now. Where is my... All right, now I've got to see if I can. I told you I've not had so many books, and now I've put singles into the whole thing, so it's a complete chaos over here. I'm not. Okay, you know what? I'm not going digging over here for Monstrous. I thought it was right up here towards the top, but I've read the first two trades of Monstrous, and after I read the first trade, I took a long break and took a long time to pick up the second trade. And then I found it on sale, so I got it because I wasn't completely enraptured by it. But then I read the second trade to see if it became more enrapturing. And there are parts of it that I really enjoy. I enjoy the setting. I enjoy the artwork. I enjoy the... But it's not coming together for me. So I wouldn't say Monstrous is something I've loved. I've enjoyed aspects of it, but I do have it, and I've read it, so at least, you know, I haven't finished it, but I'm gonna count it over here. So Batman Elmer Fudd, Mr. Miracle, and Monstrous, that's 3 to 2, 6 out of a possible 8, 10. 6 out of 10, I think, unless I'm getting that wrong. Yeah, 6 out of 10. 6 points for 2018 out of a possible 10 for 2018. All right, 2019, what do we have? Ooh, look, Matt Kidd for Grass Kings, Ether, Eternity. 2019, Tom King again. Wow, it's 2 in a row for Tom King. 2019 for Batman, Mr. Miracle, Heroes in Crisis, and Swamp Thing Winter Special. So Batman doesn't count because it's been mentioned before. Mr. Miracle doesn't count because it's been mentioned before. Heroes in Crisis, I have not read Heroes in Crisis, so that's a 0 for me. Swamp Thing Winter Special, this would normally have been a 0 because how would I, but I have it because the Swamp Thing Winter Special is included in this anthology that I talk about in that one superhero video that I did, Swamp Thing Roots of Terror. here in the deluxe edition, but this is a collection of Swamp Thing short stories, and one of the ones included in here is the Tom King Winter Special, which is a pretty impressive story. My favorite in this collection isn't the Tom King story though. So if you watch that video, I'll tell you it's interesting. But this is a good collection to have. As slim as it is, it's good. It's good bang for your buck. Especially good bang for me getting that one Tom King credit in over here for this year, which means that 0, so Heroes in Crisis is a 0, Swamp Thing Winter Special is a 2, so I'm getting 2 out of a possible 4 because the Batman and Mr. Miracle had been counted already. Okay, so 2020, we're almost here. Mark Russell. 2020, Mariko Tamaki, Harley Quinn, Breaking Glass, Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, and Archie. I have not read any of these. Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me is a book that I've heard a lot about, and I've enjoyed Mariko Tamaki. This one, Summer, with Jillian Tamaki in particular, is a terrific comic. And the funny thing is, I think in 2020, I did actually read a Mariko Tamaki superhero comic. I just read Supergirl instead of Harley Quinn, or Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. So over here, I am 0 out of 6. I didn't know Mariko Tamaki did Archie. But 0 out of 6, too bad. That sucks. I think... Has anyone read Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me? Is it very good? 0 out of 6 for 2020. And the last year... Whoa, Louis Trondheim. So here you go. This is like, when you have... I don't know. Who am I thinking of? Who has been nominated for Best Actor or Best Actress for a foreign language performance? Roberto Benigni. All right, so there we go. That's that equivalent. Suddenly, in the middle of all of the American stuff, you start seeing, and it's interesting because if you look at the publishers, you've got a lot of DC, Image, etc. all over the years, and then in 2020 and 2021, you've got IDW, Top Shelf, Magnetic Press, Self-Made Hero, Berger Books. So there's some sort of an explosion. Let's see how this category shapes up over the years coming up. All right, in 2021, James Tynion IV, Something is Killing the Children, Wind, Batman, The Department of Truth, and Razor Blades. That's 5 different books in there, of which I have read 0. Yeah, so 2020 and 2021, just not my years as far as... And I think this is just right, because I'm not necessarily reading these books when they're coming out or when they're published. And the reason why I have these books, etc., is because they were published many years ago. So as soon as you come into that period of time in which, I don't know how I managed Mr. Miracle in there, but if you come into that immediate period of time, it's going to be less likely that I have read those books, because I'm usually not that quick with reading stuff when they're being published, especially not when it's in singles and something that hasn't been collected into a trade yet, or the trade isn't available here in India yet. So all of those are my excuses for why I'm getting yet another 0, and this time out of a possible 10 points. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's Batman in there. Great. Just throw Batman in there as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's still 5. So that is 0 out of 10. And that brings us to the end of this list. This is an interesting list. I mean, as I said before, it's a little US centric. You can see some repeat winners, you can see some favorites, but it's also fun to look at who was up against whom in years past. I really have a big thrill looking at that thing. But let's see, any guesses as to what that score ended up being? So we're here at the bottom, we've got that over there, and the all right, let's go up and see what the total score was. These 2 zeros are really messing up my tally and my average right over here. There's 1 out of 10 in 2016. All right, so total 67, maybe 2. This is which 2 is this? This is the criminal 2? Yes, this is probably the criminal 2. All right, so 67 or 69. I think, yeah, I'll count that too. Out of a possible 126. So if you use the same scoring system that I did over here and not count as a possible things that are being repeated, there's 126 total points to be made over here. Out of which 67, not bad. I mean, that's more, is it? Yes, it's more than half. It's late, but I'm happy with that. What are, I guess, before I finish this extremely long live stream, I suppose I could reflect a little bit on what are the biggest misses. And this is something that Blackpole did in his video too, is going through this list. What's the significant thing that I feel that I haven't read, which is like anything that I haven't read is a significant thing. It's interesting that, a lot of these nominations, as I was talking about, so when talking about Nexus, I've never read any Nexus. The nominations are also interesting from that point of view. But of all the winners, I think Miracle Man by Neil Gaiman. Yeah, I should probably read Miracle Man by Neil Gaiman from Hitman. Right, so that's one I hear a lot about. Unknown Soldier, Bloody Mary, Lady Liberty, these two by Garth Ennis I have no idea about, so I don't know if they're big misses or something like that. So far it's Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man, Garth Ennis's Hitman. Those are the two that I'm thinking of. Alan Moore, no problem. I have you covered, Alan Moore. Brian Michael Bendis, Alias. Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the ones that I would want to read. Brian Michael Bendis, Daredevil? Let me know. Let me know if I should read Brian Michael Bendis' Daredevil. Alan Moore, Brian K. Vaughan, X Markin. These were the golden years for the love of comics scoring. Ed Brubaker, Captain America. I don't know. I guess 2007, is that when Winter Soldier? I know so little about superhero comics these days, so let me know if you think Captain America is something I should read. Ed Brubaker's Daredevil, is that something I should read? Criminal, I'll read. I'll get the first deluxe edition. Captain America, Immortal Iron Fist by Ed Brubaker, is that something I should read? You've got to remember, my resistance to a lot of these longer form superhero stories is it's a deep-rooted one by now, so I'm not automatically going to leap on something that may feel part of a larger thing. But if it's something good and works standalone, as you can see, there are a lot of superhero comics that I really enjoy, as long as they can be read in that one way and not like, oh, you didn't get it because you're not familiar with the Skrull War or something like that. Skrulls. Someone had once tried to tell me about how I'm not getting things because I haven't read every other thing there is, and it irritated me a little bit. So I have a chip on my shoulder about that. House of Mystery by Bill Willingham, is that worth reading? I don't know. Marvel's Project by Ed Brubaker, Incognito by Brubaker. I think that's one of those ones that I would definitely want to read. Irredeemable and Incorruptible. I think, yes, this is what I was feeling when I was going through the list earlier as well. I think Mark Waid's Irredeemable and Incorruptible are my two big misses. That's the one I feel that, why haven't I read these yet? Why everything about that sounds like something that I should try. And of course, there's Jason Aaron's Men of Wrath, Star Wars. Those might be good. And then when we get down to the 2020s and the 2021, Laura Dean keeps breaking up with me. I'm guessing I will read eventually. It's gotten enough good reviews and it's looked interesting enough for me to want to try it out. So that's going to happen. As for James Tynion IV, yeah, there's somebody I don't know a lot about, and I know that he's a big hotshot for a number of different reasons these days, but which one is the best of these? Something is Killing the Children. It sounds, it's got a good sound to it. It's a good title. Wind, Batman. You can leave out Batman. The Department of Truth, or Razor Blades. So I guess one of those three. Something is Killing the Children, Department of Truth, Razor Blades, or Wind. So Let me know which one you think is my biggest miss. I'm gonna go with the Mark Waid and then maybe the Daredevils by Brubaker and who was it before Brubaker? Brian Michael Bendis. All right. Well, I think that is good for this live stream. Thank you so much. This took a lot longer than I thought it would. Actually, no, it took exactly as long as I thought it would because it was a big list of things and it was a big pile of books. But I'm so glad that you were able to join me for this. I hope you had a fun time watching this live stream. I haven't gotten to any questions, etc., if there were, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining me. This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you for watching, and